Have you ever wished you could stay calm in any situation, no matter how chaotic, frustrating, or downright unfair? Imagine being the kind of person who never gets rattled by insults, never loses their cool in an argument, and never lets fear, anxiety, or anger take control. Someone who moves through life with an unshakable sense of peace while everyone else is losing their minds. Now, ask yourself, why don't you already live like this? Because your emotions, have been running the show. Think about it. How many times have you reacted out of anger and regretted it later? How often has stress ruined an entire day? How many nights have you spent replaying conversations in your head, feeling embarrassed, frustrated, or hurt? The truth is, most people don't control their emotions. Their emotions control them. But what if I told you it doesn't have to be this way? There's a way to train your mind so that emotions no longer dictate your actions, but instead serve you. A way to face life's challenges without overreacting, panicking, or getting stuck in an endless loop of worry. A way to transform emotional chaos into complete mental clarity. And the secret? Stoicism. Stoicism is not about suppressing emotions or pretending to be indifferent. It's about understanding emotions so deeply that they can no longer shake you. It's about mastering the way you think so that you can handle anything, whether it's heartbreak, betrayal, failure, or just a terrible day at work. The Stoics understood something most people never will. The key to peace isn't in avoiding emotions, but in learning how to command them. In this guide, you're going to learn exactly how to do that. And this isn't just theory. It's a survival guide for your mind. By the time you reach the end, you will no longer feel controlled by anger, stress, or fear. You will know how to calm yourself in any situation, handle criticism without a drop of self-doubt, and detach from negativity without losing your empathy. Overthinking, worrying, and emotional exhaustion will become things of the past, replaced by a deep sense of control and clarity. Sounds impossible. The Stoics proved it isn't, and soon, so will you. Once you learn what's coming next, you'll never see your emotions the same way again. Most people go through life at the mercy of their emotions. They wake up feeling fine, but one rude comment, one unexpected setback, or one piece of bad news can send them into a downward spiral. Their happiness, confidence, and peace of mind are constantly dictated by external events, like a leaf being tossed around in the wind. They know they should be stronger, more in control, more composed, but when emotions take over, all logic seems to disappear. This is where most people get it wrong. They believe emotional intelligence means suppressing emotions, keeping everything bottled up, pretending they don't care when deep down they're drowning in frustration, anxiety, or sadness. But true emotional intelligence is the opposite of suppression. It's about understanding emotions so deeply that they lose their power to control you. Emotions, when left unchecked, behave like wild animals. They react instantly, without logic, purely on instinct. A small problem suddenly feels like the end of the world. A tiny inconvenience turns into an outrage. A mild disappointment morphs into a full-blown crisis. Without self-awareness, emotions become the master, and you become the servant, blindly reacting to whatever the world throws your way. But what if emotions could be tamed? What if instead of reacting on impulse, you could step back, observe, and decide how to respond with absolute clarity? This is the heart of Stoic emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize emotions, break them down rationally, and control them before they control you. The Stoics were not cold or indifferent. They didn't ignore their emotions or pretend they didn't exist. They studied them. They questioned them. They dissected them like scientists, always asking, is this emotion justified? Does it serve me? Or is it just my mind exaggerating something trivial? Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, believed that emotions are not caused by events themselves, but by our interpretation of those events. Two people can experience the exact same setback. One collapses under pressure, while the other remains calm and adapts. The difference isn't in what happened. The difference is in how they perceive what happened. This is why two people can experience heartbreak, but one moves on quickly while the other spirals into depression. This is why two people can be criticized, but one shrugs it off while the other lets it ruin their confidence. The event is the same. The difference is in emotional interpretation. So, how do you change the way you interpret emotions? How do you train yourself to stop reacting impulsively and start handling emotions with wisdom? The first step is awareness. Most people don't realize how deeply their emotions control them because they don't question them. They feel angry and immediately assume they should be angry. They feel anxious and assume their anxiety is justified. They feel insecure and believe that insecurity is a reflection of reality rather than just a passing thought. But the moment you learn to step back and observe your emotions instead of identifying with them, everything changes. When a Stoic feels anger rising, they don't lash out. They pause and analyze it. Is my anger justified, or is it just my ego feeling attacked? When they feel anxious, they don't let it consume them. They question it. Is this fear real, or am I just imagining worst-case scenarios? This ability to step outside of emotions and look at them objectively is what separates those who are emotionally intelligent from those who are emotionally reactive. It creates an instant pause between feeling an emotion and acting on it. And in that pause, a choice appears. You can react the way you always have, or you can respond like a Stoic. The second key to Stoic emotional intelligence is reframing. This is the ability to take any emotion and see it from a different angle. Instead of seeing failure as the end, a Stoic sees it as a lesson. Instead of seeing obstacles as unfair, a Stoic sees them as opportunities to train resilience. Instead of seeing rejection as personal, a Stoic sees it as redirection towards something better. Reframing is one of the most powerful tools for emotional control because it allows you to change your perspective without changing the situation. Life doesn't always go your way. People will let you down. Challenges will appear. You can't control that, but you can control how you see those situations. Seneca, another great Stoic thinker, believed that nothing is good or bad on its own. It all depends on how you interpret it. A breakup is not inherently bad. A lost job is not inherently bad. A failure is not inherently bad. Your mind assigns meaning to these events, and if you change the meaning, you change the emotion. The third pillar of Stoic emotional intelligence is detachment. Not from life, not from people, but from the need for external validation. Most emotional suffering comes from attachment to opinions, attachment to expectations, attachment to outcomes. A Stoic knows that external things are not under their control. They focus only on what they can control, their thoughts, their actions, their response to life. If someone insults a Stoic, they don't take it personally. They ask, "Is this true? If so, I will improve. If not, it doesn't matter." If someone betrays a Stoic, they don't let it consume them. They acknowledge it, learn from it, and move on. If life throws unexpected challenges, they don't complain. They adjust, adapt, and keep moving forward. This kind of emotional discipline is rare because most people are deeply attached to how others see them. They need approval. They crave recognition. Their self-worth depends on the opinions of others. And this attachment makes them vulnerable. The moment someone criticizes them, they crumble. The moment life takes something away, they spiral into self-pity. But a Stoic builds inner stability. Their sense of self is not tied to what others think. Their confidence does not rise and fall based on external circumstances. They remain grounded, steady, immovable, because they have mastered detachment. The fourth and final key to Stoic emotional intelligence is deliberate practice. This is not something you learn once and master overnight. It takes repetition. It takes constant self-awareness. It takes daily effort to challenge old emotional habits and replace them with rational thinking. The Stoics practiced emotional control through journaling, writing down their thoughts, reflecting on their reactions, analyzing their emotions like an outsider. They practiced it through meditation, not in the modern sense, but in the sense of mentally preparing for difficulties before they happened. They would visualize challenges, prepare their minds for setbacks, and build emotional resilience in advance. Every time a Stoic faced adversity, they used it as training. They saw every difficult person as a lesson in patience, every failure as a lesson in perseverance, every moment of frustration as a chance to practice control. Over time, this rewired their brain. Instead of reacting emotionally, they responded with wisdom. Most people spend their entire lives chasing external things, money, status, relationships, believing that happiness comes from what they have. The Stoics knew better. True happiness, true peace, true freedom comes not from what you have, but from how you think. And when you master your emotions, you master life. This is not philosophy for the sake of philosophy. This is a roadmap to mental clarity, emotional strength, and complete control over how you experience the world. Most people will never learn this. Most will remain prisoners of their emotions, reacting impulsively, suffering unnecessarily. But you don't have to be like most people. You now hold the key to a mind that is unshakable, untouchable, and completely at peace. The only question is, will you use it? A mind without control is a mind in chains. The person who lacks self-command is not free. They are a puppet, pulled in every direction by emotions they barely understand. One moment they are happy, the next they are furious, insecure, or anxious. All because of something external they have no power over. Their peace is fragile, their reactions automatic. They believe they are making choices, but in reality, their emotions are making choices for them. The Stoics saw this as the greatest weakness of all. Not failure, not hardship, not even death, but the inability to rule oneself. A person who cannot regulate their emotions is no different from a ship with no captain, tossed and turned by every wave. And yet, most people go through life this way, completely unaware that they have the power to change it. But self-control is not about fighting emotions or pretending they don't exist. It is about reclaiming authority over the mind. It is about breaking the illusion that emotions are uncontrollable forces and learning to master them with clarity and precision. The Stoics did not strive to be emotionless. They strived to be deliberate, to feel everything, but to be ruled by nothing, to remain composed, no matter what storms arise. Most people spend their lives reacting. They move through the day at the mercy of whatever emotions happen to surface, If someone offends them, they lash out or stew in resentment. If things don't go as planned, they panic, complain, or spiral into self-pity. If life challenges them, they break down instead of adapting. They think this is normal because it's how most people behave. But common behavior is not the same as intelligent behavior. Just because most people are ruled by their emotions does not mean it is the only way to live. To the Stoics, reacting is weakness. It means surrendering control. It means letting external forces dictate inner peace. Every time a person explodes in anger, indulges in self-doubt, or crumbles under stress, they are handing over their power to something outside of them. They are allowing emotions to take the reins and decide their actions. And when emotions decide, regret follows. This is why mastery of self-control is the greatest strength a person can develop. It is not about being cold, indifferent, or detached. It is about standing so firmly in one's own mind that no external event has the power to shake it. It is about recognizing emotions as they arise, but refusing to be ruled by them. It is about maintaining clarity even when the world around is chaotic. Self-control is the foundation of emotional intelligence. It is what separates those who live deliberately from those who are tossed around by impulse. It is the key to peace, confidence, and resilience. But it is not something that can be learned in theory alone. It must be practiced, refined, and reinforced every day until it becomes second nature. A person who has mastered self-control is immune to manipulation. They cannot be provoked into anger because they choose their responses instead of allowing others to dictate them. They cannot be made anxious by uncertainty because they understand that their thoughts, not circumstances, create fear. They do not give in to impulses that sabotage them because they have trained their minds to act with intention rather than instinct. They move through life with quiet power, completely in control of themselves, in a world where most people are controlled by everything around them. But reaching this level of control is not easy. The mind, left untrained, is wild. It craves comfort, avoids discipline, and clings to habits that bring immediate relief but long-term regret. It reacts instead of thinking. It panics instead of adapting. It makes decisions based on fear, insecurity, and short-term pleasure rather than reason, patience, and wisdom. And if it is never disciplined, it will continue to dictate behavior in ways that lead to suffering. A Stoic does not accept this. They train the mind as one trains the body, through consistent, deliberate effort. They practice pausing before reacting. They train themselves to recognize emotions as they arise and create space between feeling and action. They do not act impulsively because they have learned that the first reaction is almost always the wrong one. They have developed the discipline to step back, assess the situation logically, and respond with wisdom instead of instinct. This ability to pause is one of the greatest weapons a person can develop. Most of life's regrets come from acting too quickly, saying things in anger that cannot be taken back, making choices out of fear that lead to worse outcomes, reacting to problems with panic instead of patience. But if a person can create even a few seconds of space between emotion and action, they regain control. They override the automatic reaction and replace it with a deliberate choice. And over time, this habit becomes so ingrained that they are no longer controlled by emotions at all. The second tool of self-control is understanding the source of emotions. Many people think emotions just happen to them, but in reality, every emotion has a root cause, a thought: fear, anger, sadness, frustration. These do not appear randomly. They come from beliefs, interpretations, and expectations. If a person believes they deserve constant validation, they will become frustrated when they do not receive it. If they believe they must control everything, they will panic when things go wrong. If they believe people must always be fair, they will be constantly angry at reality. A Stoic questions these beliefs. They understand that the mind creates emotions through interpretation, not through events themselves. And because interpretations can be changed, emotions can be controlled. If frustration comes from the belief that things should go a certain way, then changing that belief dissolves the frustration. If fear comes from the belief that uncertainty is dangerous, then learning to accept uncertainty eliminates the fear. A person who understands this no longer lets emotions control them, because they know that by adjusting their thoughts, they can reshape their feelings. The third pillar of self-control is embracing discomfort. Most emotional reactions are attempts to escape discomfort. Anger is an attempt to overpower discomfort. Fear is an attempt to avoid risk. Impulsivity is an attempt to relieve boredom. But a Stoic does not seek to escape discomfort. They welcome it. They use it as training. They understand that growth happens in discomfort, not in ease. And because of this, they no longer act out of impulse just to avoid temporary pain. A person who masters discomfort gains a level of control that others never will. They do not react emotionally to setbacks because they do not expect comfort. They do not get frustrated at obstacles because they know difficulty is part of life. They do not indulge in impulses that harm them because they have trained themselves to endure short-term discomfort in exchange for long-term strength. This ability to sit with discomfort rather than trying to escape it is one of the defining traits of a person who truly owns their mind. Another key element of self-control is detachment from external validation. Many people are controlled by the opinions of others. If they are praised, they feel confident. If they are criticized, they feel insecure. If they're ignored, they feel unworthy. Their entire emotional state depends on how others perceive them, and this makes them easy to manipulate. But a Stoic refuses to be controlled this way. They base their self-worth on who they are, not how they are seen. They understand that opinions are just words, not truths, and because of this, they are immune to both praise and criticism. A person who no longer seeks external validation gains a level of self-control that few people will ever experience. They do not get caught up in the emotional highs and lows of public perception. They do not need approval to feel at peace. They do not change their behavior to fit expectations. They are grounded, steady, and entirely independent in their self-worth. And this independence gives them complete control over their emotions, because they are no longer at the mercy of how others treat them. Mastering self-control is the foundation of mental strength. It is what allows a person to remain calm when others panic, to act with wisdom when others react with impulse, to maintain inner peace when others crumble under pressure. It is not something a person is born with. It is built. And it is built through daily discipline, deep self-awareness, and the willingness to challenge the mind rather than be enslaved by it. The world will always present situations that test emotional control. People will provoke, events will disrupt, uncertainty will arise. But a person who has trained themselves to remain steady in all conditions is untouchable. No insult can shake them. No failure can destroy them. No loss can break them. They have achieved what few ever will, the ability to command their own mind. And in doing so, they have gained the greatest power of all, absolute mastery over themselves. Yet there is something even deeper beneath self-control, a force that shapes emotions before they even arise. a hidden factor that determines how we react, what we feel, and whether or not emotions take hold of us. That force is language, because before an emotion is felt, it is named. And to truly regulate emotions like a Stoic, one must first understand how the words we choose shape the reality we experience. Words shape reality. Long before emotions take hold, before the body tenses with anger or the chest tightens with fear, before the heart sinks with disappointment or the mind spirals into frustration, there are words. Language is not just a way to describe experience. It is the lens through which experience is interpreted. A single sentence, spoken internally or aloud, has the power to amplify emotions or dissolve them. Yet most people are completely unaware of how deeply language influences their feelings. A Stoic understands that emotions are not independent forces, but reactions shaped by the words the mind chooses to describe a situation. An insult is not inherently offensive. It is only offensive if the mind labels it as such. A setback is not devastating unless the mind decides it is. A challenge is not overwhelming unless the words used to define it create the illusion that it is impossible to overcome. The mind does not react to events. It reacts to its interpretation of events, and interpretation is built entirely on language. Most emotional suffering comes not from what happens, but from the way it is verbalized internally. The difference between someone who remains calm and someone who crumbles under pressure is not that they live different realities. It is that they describe those realities differently. The same situation that causes one person anxiety can be seen by another as an opportunity. The same event that fills one person with rage can be seen by another as a trivial inconvenience. The external event does not change. The only difference is the words used to define it. Language is a tool, but it can also be a trap. It can reinforce emotional chaos or dissolve it. It can exaggerate suffering or neutralize it. It can either distort reality into something unbearable or clarify it into something manageable. A Stoic understands this and chooses words carefully, knowing that every phrase, spoken or unspoken, has consequences. The first way language shapes emotional responses is through labeling. The words used to define an experience determine how the mind reacts to it. If a setback is described as a disaster, the body and mind respond with panic. If the same setback is labeled as a minor obstacle, the response is entirely different. If a rejection is called humiliating, shame follows. If it is called a learning experience, wisdom is gained instead of insecurity. If a moment of hardship is labeled unbearable, suffering intensifies. If it is called temporary, endurance becomes easier. The mind does not react to reality. It reacts to the description of reality. This is why a Stoic deliberately chooses neutral or constructive words rather than dramatic, exaggerated ones. Instead of saying, "This is ruining my life," they say, "This is an inconvenience." Instead of, "I can't handle this," they say, "This is difficult, but I will figure it out." Instead of, "This is unfair," they say, "This is unexpected, but I will adapt." These are not empty affirmations. They are accurate, controlled descriptions of events. They strip away unnecessary drama, allowing reason to take the lead instead of emotion. Another way language shapes emotions is through internal dialogue. Every person has an ongoing conversation with themselves throughout the day, narrating experiences, making judgments, and reinforcing beliefs. But most people never question this dialogue. They assume their thoughts are simply a reflection of reality, when in fact they are often distorted interpretations of reality shaped by habitual language. If a person constantly tells themselves they are overwhelmed, they will feel overwhelmed. If they repeatedly say they are unlucky, they will interpret events in a way that reinforces this belief. If they habitually use words that emphasize struggle, "I can't do this, everything is against me, this is impossible," they will experience more struggle, because their mind has been trained to expect it. The words used internally create emotional expectations that shape perception. A Stoic does not allow uncontrolled thoughts to dictate feelings. They refine their internal dialogue with precision, ensuring that their words lead to clarity rather than confusion. They do not say, "I'm a failure." They say, "I did not succeed this time, but I can improve." They do not say, "This is hopeless." They say, "This is difficult, but I will find a way." These small changes seem subtle, but over time they rewire the brain's default emotional responses. Language also determines how much power external events hold over emotions. Many people say things like, "They made me angry," or "This situation is stressing me out," without realizing that these phrases reinforce the idea that emotions are caused by external forces rather than internal choices. This is an illusion. A Stoic understands that emotions are self-generated. No one makes another person angry. Anger is the result of an internal interpretation of an event. No situation causes stress. Stress arises from how a situation is framed in the mind. By changing language, a Stoic regains control. Instead of saying, "They made me upset," they say, "I allowed myself to react with frustration." Instead of saying, "This is stressing me out," they say, "I am experiencing stress, but I can manage it." Instead of saying, "I had no choice but to react this way," they say, "I chose to respond this way, and I can choose differently next time." These are not just words. They are mental structures that shift emotional responsibility inward, where real control exists. Another way language manipulates emotions is through assumptions embedded in phrasing. When people say things like, "I will never recover from this," or "This always happens to me," or "Nothing ever goes right," they are not just expressing feelings. They are programming their minds to believe these statements as absolute truths. These phrases create perceived permanence in emotions that are actually temporary. They reinforce suffering by removing the possibility of change. A Stoic eliminates phrases that exaggerate pain and replace them with words that reflect reality rather than emotion. They do not say, "I will never get over this." They say, "This will take time to process, but I will heal." They do not say, "This is the worst thing that could happen." They say, "This is difficult, but I have handled difficult things before." They do not say, "I always fail." They say, "I did not succeed this time, but I will learn and improve." This disciplined use of language prevents emotions from escalating into unnecessary suffering. Words also shape emotional endurance. When people use language that frames hardship as unbearable, they create resistance, which intensifies suffering. If a person believes pain must be avoided at all costs, they will struggle deeply when faced with it. If they use language that describes pain as part of growth, they will experience it differently. A Stoic does not say, "I can't stand this." They say, "This is uncomfortable, but discomfort is temporary." They do not say, "I shouldn't have to deal with this." They say, "Life presents challenges, and I am capable of handling them." These simple shifts make the difference between breaking under pressure and becoming stronger through adversity. Beyond shaping emotions in the moment, language also dictates long-term emotional patterns. a person who constantly verbalizes stress, struggle, and negativity, trains their mind to expect these emotions. A person who deliberately chooses neutral or constructive language trains their mind for resilience and stability. The Stoics understood this deeply, which is why they practiced verbal discipline. They did not allow careless words to distort reality. They did not indulge in exaggerated self-pity or emotional storytelling. They spoke with precision, ensuring that their language led to wisdom, not suffering. The true power of language is its ability to dictate perception. No event carries inherent meaning. No experience is automatically negative or positive. Meaning is assigned through words. And once meaning is assigned, emotions follow. A person who masters language masters emotions because they gain control over the narratives that shape reality. Those who fail to recognize this remain trapped. They will continue to suffer, not because life is cruel, but because their own words have framed reality in a way that guarantees suffering. Those who understand it, however, gain a kind of freedom most people will never experience. They no longer live in emotional reaction to words they have not examined. They no longer allow careless phrases to dictate their mental state. They no longer suffer because of narratives that they have the power to rewrite. This is not just philosophy. It is a method of transforming life at its core. And those who apply it will quickly discover that emotional freedom is not about avoiding pain or suppressing feelings. It is about choosing language so precisely that suffering cannot take root. But this mastery must extend beyond personal emotions. It must also be applied to how we navigate communication with others. Because just as language shapes our own emotions, it also shapes how we engage with the world. And in a time where words spread faster than ever, the ability to control them is the difference between wisdom and recklessness. The way people interact has changed more in the past 2 decades than in the past 2 millennia. The rise of the digital world has created new ways to communicate, share ideas, and build relationships, but it has also given rise to new emotional challenges. Conversations that once required face-to-face interaction are now exchanged through text, social media, and anonymous comment sections. Words that once carried the weight of direct human connection are now fired off in seconds, often without thought, without restraint, and without consequence. The result is a world where emotional reactions are amplified, misunderstandings spread like wildfire, and people find themselves caught in endless cycles of stress, outrage, and validation seeking. A Stoic does not view the digital world as a problem, but as a test of self-mastery. The internet is neither good nor bad. It is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used constructively or destructively. It can elevate the mind or enslave it. It can create clarity or chaos. It can offer wisdom, or it can pull a person into an endless loop of frustration, comparison, and wasted energy. The difference lies in how one interacts with it. Many people enter the digital world without awareness. They react to notifications as if they were commands. They engage in arguments as if they were battles to be won. And they scroll endlessly as if searching for something they cannot name. They are not in control of their digital experience. They are controlled by it. They check their devices compulsively, not because they need to, but because they have trained themselves to crave constant stimulation. Their emotions fluctuate based on likes, shares, and comments, not because these things have real significance, but because their minds have been conditioned to assign importance to them. A Stoic approaches the digital world differently. They do not fall into emotional traps set by online debates, negative news cycles, or validation-seeking behaviors. They remain deliberate in their interactions. understanding that emotional stability depends on choosing what to engage with and what to ignore. They do not allow a stranger's comment to dictate their mood. They do not allow an algorithm to determine their focus. They do not waste energy reacting to every piece of information thrown at them. They train themselves to engage only when necessary and to disengage when something offers no real value. One of the most common ways the digital world disrupts emotional balance is through misinterpretation. Written words lack tone, body language, and facial expressions. A statement that would be neutral in person can feel hostile online. A joke can be taken as an insult. A disagreement can escalate into a war of words simply because neither side is reading with clarity. Most online conflict is not born from true disagreement, but from assumed intent. A Stoic does not assume. They ask, they clarify, they recognize that words on a screen are not always what they seem. They do not waste energy being offended by a misinterpreted sentence, nor do they waste time defending themselves against those who refuse to understand. Another way the digital world triggers emotional instability is through constant comparison. Never before have people had direct access to curated versions of others' lives, displayed in highlight reels designed to showcase success, beauty, and achievement. A person scrolling through social media is not seeing reality. They are seeing fragments of reality, carefully selected to present an image. Yet the mind, if untrained, does not make this distinction. It perceives these images as evidence of a better life, a more successful person, a happier existence. And without awareness, this creates envy, insecurity, and a sense of inadequacy. A Stoic does not compare their life to an illusion. They understand that what is seen online is not the full picture. They do not measure success by artificial standards, nor do they let another person's curated reality affect their own self-worth. They remain grounded in their own values, their own progress, their own reality. They do not need validation from digital approval because their sense of self is built on something internal, not external. They use social media as a tool for connection and learning, but they do not allow it to dictate their emotions. The digital world is also designed for addiction. Social media platforms, news websites, and content algorithms are built to capture attention and hold it for as long as possible. They thrive on outrage, controversy, and emotional triggers. They know that anger spreads faster than reason, that fear holds attention longer than peace, and that drama is more engaging than wisdom. Many people fall into this cycle without realizing it. They feel the pull to check their phones, to refresh their feeds, to engage in debates that lead nowhere. They believe they are choosing to do this, but in reality, they are being pulled by design. A Stoic does not allow their time and focus to be hijacked by digital distractions. They are aware of how these systems work, and they train themselves to resist compulsive engagement. They do not scroll mindlessly. They do not consume news without discernment. They do not waste hours reacting to things that do not deserve their attention. They set clear boundaries for digital consumption, ensuring that their mind remains sharp, their emotions remain stable, and their time is spent on things that actually matter. One of the greatest tests of emotional control in the digital world is how one responds to criticism. The internet has given everyone a voice, but it has also given rise to a culture of hostility where negativity is amplified and personal attacks are common. Many people feel emboldened behind a screen, saying things they would never say in person. They insult, provoke, and seek reactions, and for those who are unprepared, this can be deeply unsettling. A single rude comment, a false accusation, or an unfair judgment can cause anger, frustration, or self-doubt. A Stoic does not engage in meaningless battles. They do not waste energy defending themselves against those who argue in bad faith. They do not react emotionally to insults because they recognize an insult only has power if it is accepted. They do not feel the need to correct every false statement, nor do they seek approval from people who do not know them. They understand that the opinions of strangers hold no real value unless they choose to assign value to them. They choose their battles wisely, and most of the time they choose to walk away. There is also the challenge of information overload. The digital world provides access to more knowledge than ever before, but too much information can be as dangerous as too little. When a person consumes endless streams of data, opinions and updates, their mind becomes cluttered. They struggle to focus. They become anxious about events they cannot control. They mistake constant exposure for wisdom, when in reality, excessive information often leads to confusion rather than clarity. A Stoic is selective in what they consume. They do not feel the need to be aware of everything, only what is useful, relevant, and within their control. They filter out noise. They resist the urge to stay plugged into every debate, every controversy, every piece of breaking news. They focus on knowledge that improves their understanding rather than overwhelms it. The final challenge of the digital world is the illusion of connection. While technology allows people to stay in touch across distances, it has also led to a decline in real, meaningful interactions. Many mistake likes, comments, and messages for genuine relationships, forgetting that true connection requires depth, presence, and sincerity. A Stoic does not confuse digital interaction with real connection. They use technology to maintain relationships, but they prioritize face-to-face interactions, deep conversations, and moments of true engagement. They do not replace real connection with artificial validation. They recognize that 1,000 shallow interactions are not equal to one meaningful relationship. The modern world presents new challenges, but the principles of Stoicism remain timeless. Self-mastery does not change with technology. Emotional control is not outdated. The ability to remain calm, focused, and deliberate is as essential in the digital world as it was in ancient times. The difference is that now the test is constant. The distractions are stronger. The triggers are more frequent. The noise is louder. But the solution remains the same: awareness, discipline, and self-control. Those who master these will navigate the digital age with clarity, while those who do not will remain caught in an endless cycle of reaction, comparison, and distraction. The choice is always present, and the ones who recognize this choice will always have the advantage. Yet, not all emotions triggered by the digital world are loud and obvious. Some are subtle, creeping in through disappointment, rejection, or unexpected setbacks. There is a difference between anger and disappointment, frustration and deep sadness. And understanding how to process these emotions separately is the next step toward mastering Stoic resilience. Emotional mastery is not just about control, it is about understanding. A person cannot regulate what they do not recognize, nor can they free themselves from emotions they do not fully comprehend. Many believe negative emotions are a single force, an enemy to be resisted or suppressed. But this approach is flawed. Not all emotions function the same way, and not all require the same response. To gain true mastery, one must learn to distinguish between emotions that demand restraint and emotions that demand reflection. Anger and disappointment are often mistaken for one another, yet they are entirely different experiences. Anger is explosive, outward-facing, immediate. It demands a reaction, a response, a confrontation. It arises when one perceives an injustice, a personal offense, or an obstacle blocking their desires. It is fueled by a sense of entitlement to control, the belief that people should behave a certain way, that events should unfold in a specific manner, and that anything outside of this expectation is a violation that must be corrected. Disappointment, on the other hand, is quiet, inward-facing, lingering. It does not demand action, but rather it sinks into the mind like a weight. It is the result of unmet expectations, of desires that were not fulfilled, of hope that did not materialize into reality. Unlike anger, which flares up and seeks immediate expression, disappointment does not erupt. It settles. It lingers in silence, in thoughts replayed, in quiet moments of reflection that turn into resignation. A Stoic does not react to emotions blindly. They analyze before they act. When anger arises, they question it. What exactly am I reacting to? Is this offense real, or is it my interpretation? Do I truly need to respond, or is my ego demanding validation? When disappointment lingers, they investigate its roots. Was this expectation realistic? Am I suffering from the loss of an outcome, or from my attachment to that outcome? By breaking down emotions into their true causes, they remove the illusion that emotions dictate action. Anger is often fueled by personal offense. When insulted, criticized, or dismissed, the natural reaction is to defend, to retaliate, to restore one's sense of dignity by striking back. But a Stoic recognizes that dignity is not given by others, and therefore it cannot be taken away by others. No insult has power unless it is accepted. No criticism wounds unless the mind believes it to be true. The moment a person realizes that external words do not change their internal worth, anger loses its hold. A Stoic does not waste energy fighting battles of pride. They see insults for what they are, mere words, empty unless embraced. Disappointment, however, is not always about pride. It is about loss, loss of hope, loss of certainty, loss of the expected path. It is more subtle than anger, yet more difficult to shake. While anger seeks an outlet, disappointment seeks an explanation. The mind returns to what went wrong, what should have been different, what could have been prevented. This loop of questioning keeps disappointment alive far longer than necessary. A Stoic cuts the loop by confronting reality as it is, not as they wished it to be. They remind themselves that expectations are not guarantees, that life unfolds according to its own nature, not personal desires. They ask, was I promised this outcome, or did I assume it? Was this event within my control, or was I always at the mercy of external forces? These questions dissolve disappointment, not by ignoring it, but by removing the illusion that the world was ever obligated to match personal hopes. Anger thrives in the belief that things should be different. A Stoic replaces should with is. The world is not fair or unfair. It simply exists in accordance with nature, with human behavior, with cause and effect. People will be flawed. Events will be unpredictable. Challenges will arise not because they are meant as personal attacks, but because they are part of existence. When one accepts this, anger loses its force. It has no fuel, because there is nothing left to fight. Disappointment often lingers because of attachment to the past. A person who cannot let go of what could have been will find themselves trapped in what never was. They replay moments, thinking of different choices, different words, different actions. They construct alternate versions of events, believing these imagined realities to be better than the present. But these versions are illusions, shadows of something that never existed outside the mind. A Stoic doesn't live in shadows. They recognize that the past is no longer real, only the present is. They do not grieve over what never happened. They adapt to what is. There is also a difference in how anger and disappointment affect energy. Anger is a fire. It surges, it consumes, but it also burns out quickly if not fed. This is why many regret words spoken in anger, because the emotion passes, but the damage remains. A Stoic does not act while consumed by fire. They step back, they breathe, they wait. If an action is truly necessary, it will still be necessary when calm returns. If not, then anger was merely an illusion, a trick of the mind that would have led to unnecessary conflict. Disappointment, however, does not burn. It weighs. It does not surge, but it lingers, quietly draining the mind's strength, pulling thoughts into cycles of doubt. It is not a force that compels immediate action, but a slow, persistent erosion of motivation. This is why a Stoic addresses disappointment differently than anger. They do not restrain it as they would anger. They redirect it. They take energy that would be lost in regret and reinvest it into learning, into action, into forward movement. While anger seeks an enemy, disappointment seeks a reason. But the search for reason can become an endless trap. People assume that if they understand why something failed, why a person left, why an opportunity was lost, then they will find peace. But some questions have no answers. Some things fail not because of a grand reason, but because failure is part of life. A Stoic does not waste time looking for explanations where none exist. They do not wait for understanding before they move forward. They accept first, and through acceptance they regain clarity. Another key difference is that anger is outward-focused. Disappointment is inward-focused. Anger wants to change others, to make them behave differently, to correct their mistakes. Disappointment, however, turns inward, making a person question themselves, their choices, their worth. If left unchecked, it leads to self-doubt, withdrawal, and emotional paralysis. A Stoic recognizes that other people's actions are not within their control, but their own response always is. They do not attempt to force change where change is not theirs to command. They also do not allow disappointment to turn into self-rejection. A single failure does not define ability. A single loss does not determine future potential. They step outside of emotion and see clearly. One event is just that, one event. It has no greater meaning unless meaning is given to it. The greatest danger of anger is destruction. If unchecked, it leads to broken relationships, burned bridges, irreversible actions. The greatest danger of disappointment is stagnation. If left unresolved, it causes a person to hesitate, to withdraw, to stop taking action out of fear of further failure. Both are damaging, but in different ways. A Stoic neutralizes anger through perspective, seeing that no offense is truly worth the loss of control. They dissolve disappointment through movement, refusing to let the weight of failure keep them from trying again. Both emotions are part of life, but neither should rule it. A Stoic experiences them, but does not live in them. They allow anger to rise and fall without acting on it. They allow disappointment to pass through without allowing it to take root. They remain steady, composed, untouchable, not because they do not feel, but because they do not let emotions decide their path. Understanding the difference between these emotions is not just about personal peace. It is about how one treats others. Because just as emotions shape internal thoughts, they also shape external relationships. And in moments of interaction, in conversations, in conflicts, how one chooses to react determines the quality of those relationships. The next step in mastering emotions is learning how to navigate human interactions with reason instead of impulse. Because emotional mastery is not just an internal practice, it is a skill that must be applied in the presence of others, where words, actions, and emotions collide. Emotional mastery is only complete when it transforms behavior. It is not enough to understand emotions or even to control them in isolation. The true test of Stoic discipline comes in how one responds to the world, to others, to challenges, and to the countless situations that demand an immediate reaction. Most people do not act, they react. Their behavior is dictated by emotions, not reason. They feel anger and lash out, feel hurt and withdraw, feel anxious and avoid action. They are not leading their emotions are leading them. A Stoic does not operate this way. They do not allow emotion to hijack their behavior, nor do they let fleeting feelings dictate long-term decisions. They understand that emotions exist to inform, not to command. Feelings provide insight into what is happening internally, but it is the mind that decides what to do with that information. This separation between feeling and action is what allows a person to respond rationally instead of reacting impulsively. Most people believe that strong emotions require immediate expression. If they feel insulted, they believe they must defend themselves. If they feel attacked, they believe they must counterattack. If they feel overwhelmed, they believe they must escape. But these responses are often not chosen. They are automatic. They are habits formed over years of unexamined reactions. A Stoic sees this and chooses differently. They pause, they reflect, and they respond based on principles, not impulses. The first step to responding rationally is recognizing that emotions are not commands. Feeling something does not mean it must be acted upon. Anger does not require retaliation. Anxiety does not require avoidance. Sadness does not require withdrawal. A Stoic observes emotions as passing signals, not absolute truths. They allow the feeling to arise, but they do not obey it blindly. Behavior is not dictated by emotion. It is dictated by interpretation. Two people can face the same event and respond in entirely different ways. One may see failure as a catastrophe and spiral into despair. The other may see it as an opportunity and adjust their course. The event is the same, but the interpretation changes the response. A Stoic trains themselves to choose the most useful interpretation rather than the one emotions immediately suggest. An insult is just words, but if the mind interprets it as a personal attack, anger follows. If the mind interprets it as a reflection of the other person's ignorance, then the emotion never takes hold. A setback is just an event, but if the mind interprets it as proof of failure, disappointment grows. If it is seen as a lesson, resilience builds instead. A Stoic does not accept the first interpretation emotion presents. They examine, question, and reshape it until it serves them. Many react to emotions as if they are inevitable, but emotions are shaped by thoughts. Change the thought, and the emotional response changes with it. This is why Stoics practice detachment from first reactions. They do not assume their feelings are correct just because they feel strong. They step back and ask, is this interpretation serving me? Is this response aligned with reason? Is this action necessary, or am I simply reacting without thinking? Most emotional reactions come from unquestioned expectations. People expect to be treated fairly, so they become angry when they are not. They expect things to go as planned, so they panic when they do not. They expect success to come easily, so they become frustrated when challenges arise. A Stoic eliminates unnecessary expectations, understanding that the world is not obligated to align with personal desires. They do not demand fairness, predictability, or ease. Because they expect challenges, they are never emotionally unprepared. A rational response requires patience. Impulse demands immediate action, but wisdom waits. A Stoic trains themselves to pause before responding. Even a few seconds of hesitation is enough to prevent regret. They do not make decisions in moments of heightened emotion, because they know that an emotional mind is a biased mind. They wait for clarity, and only then do they act. A person who reacts without thinking is easily manipulated. They can be provoked into anger, lured into conflict, or distracted by emotional bait. But a Stoic is immune to manipulation because they control their responses. They do not allow others to dictate their behavior. They do not get pulled into arguments they did not choose. They do not defend themselves against baseless accusations. They respond only when necessary, and even then, only in a way that aligns with their values. Rational behavior is not about suppressing emotions. It is about directing them. A Stoic does not avoid feeling. They simply ensure that their feelings do not override their principles. They may feel frustration, but choose patience. They may feel insulted, but choose dignity. They may feel doubt, but choose action. Their emotions exist, but they do not govern them. Impulse weakens discipline. Every time a person reacts emotionally without restraint, they reinforce the habit of being controlled rather than in control. Every time they resist an emotional reaction and respond with reason. Instead, they strengthen the habit of self-command. Over time, these small moments of restraint accumulate into unshakable discipline. A rational response requires understanding what is within control. Many react emotionally because they attempt to change what they cannot. They try to force others to act differently. To demand reality conforms to their wishes. To insist that events unfold in a specific way. A Stoic focuses only on what is within their power, their thoughts, their actions, their responses. They do not waste energy on battles that cannot be won. A key to rational behavior is emotional neutrality. While most are carried by highs and lows, a Stoic maintains stability. They do not over-celebrate success because they know circumstances change. They do not despair in failure because they know growth comes through hardship. They do not allow their mood to be dictated by external conditions. This neutrality is not indifference, it is balance. It is the ability to remain steady, whether facing praise or criticism, victory or loss. Most conflicts escalate not because of one person's actions, but because of another's reaction. A harsh word is spoken, and instead of absorbing it with composure, it is returned with greater force. A misunderstanding arises, and instead of clarifying, pride turns it into a battle of egos. A Stoic breaks the cycle of emotional escalation. They do not react just because someone else is reacting. They do not fight unnecessary battles. They do not fuel conflicts that could be diffused with silence or a single composed response. When emotions are controlled, energy is preserved. Many waste their strength on meaningless emotional struggles, arguing about things that do not matter, stressing over things they cannot change, overanalyzing words that were spoken in passing. A Stoic does not waste energy this way. They conserve their mental strength for what truly matters. They focus their attention on what is productive, what is meaningful, what is aligned with their purpose. One of the greatest skills in responding rationally is choosing not to respond at all. Many feel the need to engage in every debate, to prove themselves right, to correct every misunderstanding. But not every battle is worth fighting. A Stoic knows when silence is the most powerful response. They do not argue with those who do not seek understanding. They do not defend themselves against baseless accusations. They do not react just because someone demands a reaction. Their peace is not dependent on proving themselves to others. The modern world encourages immediate reaction. Social media rewards outrage, news cycles amplify fear, and conversations are driven by impulse rather than thought. But a Stoic does not participate in this emotional chaos. They remain steady, deliberate, rational. They do not give in to the need for immediate validation. They do not let the noise of the world dictate their inner state. The greatest power a person can have is the ability to act instead of react, to move through the world with clarity instead of impulse, to respond to challenges with wisdom instead of fear, to face conflict with composure instead of aggression. This is not something that happens by accident. It is a choice, reinforced daily, until it becomes an unshakable habit. Emotional mastery does not end with personal behavior. It extends into every interaction, shaping how one raises children, how one leads, how one teaches. The next level of Stoic practice is applying these lessons to those who depend on us. Because true mastery is not just about personal discipline, it is about passing down strength to the next generation. True mastery of emotional resilience is not just a personal pursuit, it is a responsibility. Strength of mind, clarity of thought, and emotional stability should not die with the individual. They must be passed down, instilled in the next generation, embedded so deeply that they become second nature. A person who has learned to regulate their own emotions, but fails to teach this to their children, has left their work unfinished. The real test of wisdom is not whether one can apply it alone, but whether they can cultivate it in those who will shape the future. Most people do not inherit emotional resilience. They inherit emotional habits. They absorb the behaviors of those who raise them. If they grow up surrounded by impulsivity, they learn to react without thinking. If they are shielded from discomfort, they become fragile in the face of hardship. If they are rewarded for seeking validation, they become dependent on the opinions of others. Children do not learn by words alone. They learn by watching. They internalize the emotional responses of those around them. This means that a child does not need a lecture on emotional resilience. They need to witness it. A parent, teacher, or mentor who remains composed under stress teaches more than any speech on self-control ever could. A child who sees patience modeled learns patience. A child who watches calm in the face of difficulty learns to face struggles without fear. The first principle in raising an emotionally resilient child is teaching them that emotions do not dictate actions. Many adults struggle with this, allowing their moods to control their behavior, reacting without restraint, speaking without thinking. A child who grows up in an environment where emotions are left unchecked will assume that feelings are in control. If they feel angry, they will believe they must lash out. If they feel anxious, they will believe they must retreat. They will grow into adults who mistake emotions for commands, never realizing that they have the power to separate what they feel from how they act. A Stoic parent does not dismiss emotions, but guides a child in how to experience them without becoming enslaved by them. They do not say, "Stop being upset," or "You shouldn't feel that way," because emotions cannot be turned off like a switch. Instead, they ask, What are you feeling right now? What caused it? What can you do with that feeling? They help the child observe the emotion without being overwhelmed by it. They teach them to step outside of it, to examine it with curiosity rather than letting it dictate their actions. Emotional resilience does not mean avoiding negative emotions. It means understanding them without being consumed by them. A child who is never allowed to be frustrated never learns patience. A child who is never allowed to experience failure never develops perseverance. Many parents believe protecting a child from discomfort is kindness, but it is not. It is theft. It robs them of the ability to develop strength, of the experience of overcoming, of the chance to realize that they are capable of enduring more than they think. A Stoic parent does not remove challenges. They teach the child how to face them. When a child struggles, the instinct may be to step in, to solve the problem, to remove the difficulty. But if every difficulty is removed, the child never learns how to navigate hardship on their own. They become adults who collapse at the first sign of resistance. Instead of stepping in, a Stoic parent asks, "How will you handle this?" They guide, they encourage, but they do not interfere in ways that make the child dependent on rescue. A critical part of emotional resilience is teaching a child to separate themselves from external validation. Many children grow up believing their worth is determined by others, by praise, by grades, by approval. They become addicted to being liked, terrified of disappointing others, dependent on recognition to feel valuable. This creates adults who are easily manipulated, who seek approval over truth, who fear failure because they believe it defines them. A Stoic parent prevents this by teaching the child that their value is not external, it is internal. They praise effort over outcome, character over achievement. They do not tie love to success. They do not let a child believe that making mistakes makes them less worthy. They teach them that who they are is not determined by what others think. Another essential lesson is how to handle criticism. Many people react to criticism with anger, defensiveness, or self-doubt. This is because they were never taught that criticism is not an attack. It is information. A Stoic parent teaches a child to ask, "Is this criticism true?" If it is, then there is something to learn. If it is not, then it holds no weight. They do not let their child believe that criticism must be feared. They teach them that words do not define them unless they choose to accept them. Emotional resilience also requires understanding what is within control. Many children are taught, unintentionally, that the world should accommodate them, that life should be fair, that others should behave as expected. When reality does not align with these assumptions, they become frustrated, bitter, or disillusioned. A Stoic parent does not let their child grow up with false expectations. They teach them that life is unpredictable, that fairness is an illusion, that control exists only over one's own actions. They do not raise a child who believes the world owes them anything. They raise a child who is adaptable, who does not complain about what cannot be changed, who doesn't waste energy wishing for circumstances to be different, but instead focuses on what they can do with what is in front of them. A Stoic child is not fragile. They do not crumble under pressure because they were raised to expect difficulty. They do not need constant validation because they were never taught to depend on it. They do not break down at failure because they were taught that failure is part of growth. They do not fear criticism because they were raised to see it as a tool, not an attack. They do not waste energy on what is outside their control because they were never led to believe that the world would adjust to their desires. Many people believe resilience is something that comes naturally, but it is not. It is taught, it is cultivated, it is embedded in small lessons, in daily interactions, in the way a child sees the adults around them handle emotions. The person who grows up watching discipline, watching patience, watching emotional control, learns these things without needing them explained. A child absorbs what is demonstrated, not just what is said. A Stoic parent also understands that their own behavior shapes the emotional stability of their child. A parent who is quick to anger raises a child who believes anger is power. A parent who avoids difficult conversations raises a child who avoids conflict. A parent who complains about everything raises a child who believes complaining is a solution. A parent who is ruled by emotions raises a child who believes emotions are rulers. Raising an emotionally resilient child is not about controlling them. It is about teaching them to control themselves. It is about helping them understand emotions without being enslaved by them, guiding them through struggle without making them dependent, teaching them to navigate life without illusions about how life should be. It is about giving them the tools to face the world without needing the world to change for them. A child raised this way grows into an adult who is not easily shaken. They do not feel the need to prove themselves through anger or overreaction. They do not expect success to come without effort. They do not break under pressure because they have known pressure and learned to endure it. They are not trapped by the opinions of others because they were never taught to seek approval over integrity. They are not fragile because they were not sheltered from discomfort. They are not weak because they were never made to believe the world would soften itself for them. The true test of Stoic teaching is not whether one can master their own emotions. It is whether they can raise the next generation to do the same. Strength is not an individual achievement. It is something that must be passed down, reinforced, spread through example. If emotional resilience is not taught, then the next generation will inherit the same struggles, the same weaknesses, the same patterns of reaction instead of reason. A Stoic ensures this cycle is broken. They raise a child who is prepared for life, not just for comfort. They raise a child who does not fear struggle, but embraces it. They raise a child who does not crumble under failure, but learns from it. They raise a child who does not react blindly, but responds with wisdom. And in doing so, they do not just raise a child. They raise a future leader, a person who will continue the path of discipline, clarity, and emotional mastery. Emotional resilience does not end in the home, nor is it only tested in face-to-face interactions. It extends into every aspect of life, including the vast and unpredictable world of the internet. Raising emotionally stable individuals is one thing, but keeping that stability intact when exposed to an environment built on impulsive reactions, faceless hostility, and endless distractions is another. The modern world demands a new kind of discipline, one that protects the mind from being pulled into digital chaos. Those who fail to master this will find themselves exhausted by arguments, consumed by the need for validation, and emotionally drained by battles that never needed to be fought. Anonymity has given people the freedom to speak without consequence, and while this can be used for good, allowing people to express ideas freely, it has also created a culture of hostility, where many say things they would never dare to say in person. The internet is filled with people who seek attention through provocation, who thrive on conflict, and who try to pull others into useless emotional engagement. Many fall into this trap, responding to insults, correcting strangers, defending themselves against people who have no interest in understanding them. But a Stoic does not waste energy this way. The first step in maintaining emotional control online is understanding what is worth responding to and what is best ignored. Not every opinion deserves attention. Not every argument needs participation. Not every insult demands a response. The moment a person realizes they have no obligation to engage with negativity, they gain a power that most people never develop: the ability to remain unaffected by noise. This is not avoidance. This is not weakness. This is control. A person who reacts to every comment, every post, every criticism is easily manipulated. They are not in control of themselves. Their emotions are being pulled by external forces. A Stoic sees online interactions for what they truly are. Most are not real conversations but performances, where people seek validation, control, or attention. Many arguments are not about truth, but about dominance. Many criticisms are not meant to help, but to provoke. Recognizing this removes the illusion that every interaction needs engagement. Indifference does not mean being passive. It does not mean refusing to have an opinion or avoiding all discussions. It means choosing carefully where energy is spent. A Stoic does not engage out of impulse. They do not correct false information unless doing so serves a purpose. They do not defend themselves against baseless accusations because they know that truth does not need constant defense. They do not enter debates where the other party has no interest in actual discussion. One of the greatest traps of the online world is the illusion of significance. A person receives an insult online, and their emotions respond as if they were insulted in person. They see a negative comment and feel the urge to correct it, as if the words of a stranger hold weight. But the internet magnifies everything. Small issues feel like large ones. Irrelevant opinions feel personal. Minor conflicts feel urgent. The reality is that most things do not matter. A comment section is not a courtroom. A random insult is not an attack. A stranger's opinion carries no true impact unless it is given power. A Stoic masters detachment from digital validation. Many people base their emotional state on how they are perceived online. They seek approval, measure self-worth through likes, allow their mood to rise and fall with engagement. But this creates dependence on external recognition, a weakness that makes emotional stability impossible. A person who requires validation will always be vulnerable to the withdrawal of that validation. A person who is indifferent to approval is untouchable. Online etiquette is a test of discipline. The way a person interacts digitally reflects their level of self-mastery. Many assume that because interactions are not face-to-face, their words hold less weight. They speak carelessly, react without thought, engage in arguments they would never entertain in real life. They abandon restraint because they mistake digital interaction for something separate from reality. But words have consequences, even in the digital world. A Stoic applies the same standards online as they do in person. They do not lose their principles when hidden behind a screen. They do not let anonymity turn them into someone they would not respect in the real world. A common emotional trap online is the need to win. Many debates are not about ideas, they are about ego. People engage not to understand, but to dominate, to prove superiority, to crush an opposing viewpoint. But the moment one enters a battle for pride, they have already lost. A Stoic does not engage in conflict for the sake of winning. They engage only when it serves a purpose, when the discussion leads to clarity, when the exchange adds value. They never argue just to be right. Another key principle of Stoic indifference is resisting emotional contagion. The internet thrives on emotional manipulation. News cycles, social media trends, viral debates, all are designed to trigger reactions. Fear spreads easily. Outrage is contagious. Many live in a state of constant emotional reaction, pulled from one controversy to the next, allowing external forces to dictate their focus. A Stoic does not allow themselves to be emotionally hijacked. They control what they consume, what they engage with, what they allow into their mind. They do not participate in mass outrage. They do not let fear-based narratives shape their worldview. They filter out what does not serve them. Online indifference is not about ignoring the world. It is about deciding what is worth emotional investment. A person who is reactive is exhausted by every headline, every comment, every meaningless debate. A person who's indifferent remains steady. They are not controlled by algorithms, not swayed by trends, not addicted to the endless cycle of digital noise. They choose how to engage, when to engage, and most importantly, when to walk away. Another important lesson is how to handle personal attacks. Many believe they must defend their reputation against every insult, prove themselves against every accusation. But this is a trap. The moment a person feels the need to defend themselves to strangers, they have placed their self-worth in the hands of people who do not matter. A Stoic asks, does this criticism reveal truth, or is it meant to provoke? If it is true, then it is an opportunity for growth. If it is false, then it holds no weight. Either way, it does not require an emotional reaction. Silence is often the most powerful response. Many seek reactions, not understanding. They insult, provoke, attack, not because they believe in what they are saying, but because they want attention, they want conflict, they want engagement. A Stoic denies them this. They do not entertain meaningless arguments. They do not feed the cycle of negativity. They do not play games with people who have nothing to lose. They understand that dignity is never won through emotional reaction. It is maintained through composure. The internet will never change. There will always be insults, misinformation, conflict. But a person can change how they interact with it. They can choose to remain unaffected, to guard their energy, to maintain their principles, regardless of the environment. A person who is ruled by emotion will always be at the mercy of the digital world. A person who is indifferent to nonsense is free. Online interactions are a test of character. Those who fail allow emotions to dictate their responses. Those who succeed master the art of engaging without attachment, responding without being pulled, observing without absorbing. They do not seek approval. They do not chase validation. They do not allow strangers to dictate their emotional state. They enter the digital world as an observer, not a captive. The practice of Stoic indifference in the online world is an extension of emotional resilience in the real world. A person who is indifferent to digital attacks will be indifferent to personal insults. A person who does not need online validation will not need real-world validation. A person who remains calm in the face of digital outrage will remain calm in any setting. The habits built online become habits in life. True freedom is the ability to interact without being controlled, to respond without being reactive, to engage without being consumed. The modern world offers endless opportunities to waste energy, to become trapped in cycles of conflict, to be pulled into battles that do not need to be fought. But those who master indifference remain unshaken. They walk through the noise untouched. They choose where to invest their time, their focus, their emotions. And in doing so, they preserve their greatest asset, their peace. Yet peace is not just about avoiding unnecessary conflict. It is also about seeking something deeper, something more enduring than fleeting happiness. It is about understanding the difference between happiness and contentment, between chasing emotional highs and building a foundation of unshakable stability. This is the next step toward true emotional mastery. The world constantly pushes the idea that happiness is the ultimate goal. Everywhere, people are told to chase it, to seek it in success, in relationships, in material achievements. But few ever stop to question what happiness really is. Is it a feeling, a moment of joy, a lasting state of mind? The pursuit of happiness has left many exhausted, constantly running after something that seems to slip away the moment it is reached. No matter how much is achieved, no matter how much is gained, there is always the next thing to desire, the next milestone to reach. This endless chase is not fulfillment, it is a trap. Happiness is a fleeting emotion. It rises and falls based on external conditions. A person feels happy when they receive praise, when they achieve a goal, when life goes as expected. But as soon as circumstances change, happiness fades. This makes it unreliable, unstable, something that cannot be controlled. A Stoic does not seek happiness because they understand that what can be taken away was never truly theirs to begin with. Instead, they cultivate something far greater: contentment. Contentment is not an emotional high. It is not excitement, nor is it temporary pleasure. It is a deep, steady state of being at peace with life, regardless of circumstances. It does not rise when things go well or fall when things go wrong. It remains constant because it is not based on external validation, on success, or on comfort. A person who is content does not need things to be perfect to feel at ease. They do not live in emotional highs and lows. They do not depend on the world to align with their desires to feel fulfilled. Their stability is internal, unshakable, and untouchable by external forces. Most people mistake happiness for success. They assume that achieving goals, acquiring wealth, or gaining status will bring permanent satisfaction. But how often does success actually bring peace? Many who reach their dreams find themselves just as restless, just as unsatisfied, always looking for the next challenge. This is because happiness is based on achievement, but contentment is based on acceptance. A person who can only be satisfied when they achieve more will always feel a sense of lack. A person who is content, however, does not measure their worth by external accomplishments. They do not feel the need to constantly prove themselves. They do not believe that the next milestone will finally bring them peace. They have already found it within. The modern world has conditioned people to believe that more is always better. More success, more money, more experiences, more possessions. But Stoicism teaches the opposite, that true fulfillment comes not from adding more, but from needing less. A person who always wants more is a prisoner of desire. No matter what they achieve, they will never feel it is enough. But a person who can be satisfied with what they have, who does not crave endlessly, is truly free. They do not depend on things outside their control to feel whole. Happiness is often confused with pleasure. Many seek joy in entertainment, in indulgence, in distractions. They believe that the absence of struggle is the key to a good life. But comfort is not fulfillment. Avoiding hardship does not lead to strength. A Stoic does not avoid difficulty. They embrace it, knowing that meaning is found not in the absence of struggle, but in the ability to navigate it with grace. One of the reasons happiness is so unreliable is that it depends on expectations. When things go as planned, happiness follows. When life takes an unexpected turn, happiness disappears. This means that happiness is fragile. It is always one misstep away from being shattered. But contentment is different. It does not require life to unfold in a specific way. It does not resist the unexpected. A Stoic does not suffer because things did not go as expected. They accept life as it comes, adapting, adjusting, and remaining at peace. They do not believe that external conditions must be controlled to feel inner stability. A person who depends on happiness will always be at the mercy of circumstances. If they are praised, they feel good. If they are criticized, they feel bad. If they achieve something, they feel proud. If they fail, they feel worthless. Their emotions are dictated by events, not by inner principles. A Stoic refuses to let this happen. Their sense of self is not built on shifting conditions. They do not allow external opinions to shape their inner peace. They don't rely on validation to feel worthy. They know who they are, and because of this, they remain steady, whether praised or ignored, successful or struggling. Happiness is passive. It is something people wait for, something they hope will come. Contentment is active. It is something a person chooses. It is not about feeling good all the time, but about accepting reality without resistance. A Stoic does not ask, "How can I be happy?" They ask, "How can I remain undisturbed no matter what happens?" The modern world pushes happiness as something that must be pursued. But why pursue something that is temporary? Why chase something that disappears the moment reality shifts? The pursuit itself is the problem. A Stoic does not chase after emotions. They master them. They do not seek fulfillment outside themselves because they know it can only be built within. They focus not on what they lack, but on what they already have. They practice gratitude not as a surface-level habit, but as a deep recognition that they need far less than they once believed. Happiness is rooted in comparison. People feel good when they believe they have more than others. They feel bad when they perceive themselves as lacking. This is why happiness is unstable, because it is measured against others, and there will always be someone who seems to have more. But contentment is not based on comparison. A Stoic does not care if someone else is wealthier, more successful, more admired. They do not base their satisfaction on external rankings. Their peace comes from within, untouched by what others have or achieve. Happiness is an emotional high, and like all highs, it fades. Contentment is a foundation. It does not rely on circumstances, on luck, or on temporary pleasures. It remains through difficulties, through setbacks, through all of life's unpredictability. A Stoic understands that the key to fulfillment is not in gaining more, but in needing less. Many believe that ambition and contentment cannot coexist. They assume that if a person is satisfied, they will stop striving. But true contentment does not mean giving up goals. It means not being emotionally dependent on their outcome. A Stoic still works, still grows, still pushes forward, but they do not tie their peace to success. If they fail, they do not despair. If they succeed, they do not become arrogant. Their stability does not rise and fall with external achievements. They pursue excellence not because they believe it will bring happiness, but because the pursuit itself is meaningful. The greatest freedom is the ability to be at peace in any situation. A person who depends on happiness will always be chasing, always waiting for the next thing. A person who has built contentment is already free. They do not rely on the world to behave a certain way. They do not need conditions to be perfect. They do not wait for things to go their way before they allow themselves to feel at ease. They choose stability every single day. Contentment is not the absence of struggle. It is the ability to remain unshaken by it. It is not the avoidance of hardship. It is the realization that true strength comes from enduring. It is not the pursuit of fleeting joy. It is the cultivation of an inner state that cannot be disturbed. Most people will never reach this level of freedom because they will never question the idea that happiness is the goal. They will keep chasing, keep running, keep searching for something that was never meant to last. A Stoic, however, sees the truth. They stop chasing. They stop needing. They stop believing that the next achievement will finally bring peace. They build it within themselves, independent of the world, independent of outcomes, independent of circumstances. This is the foundation of lasting fulfillment, the ability to stand firm while the world changes, to remain undisturbed while emotions rise and fall, to move through life with clarity rather than attachment. It is not something given, it's something chosen, something built, something practiced. It's the difference between being pulled by external forces and being in control of one's own state of mind. Yet, self-mastery does not stop at understanding oneself. The path of true Stoic development requires deep self-awareness, the ability to look inward with clarity, to recognize patterns, to understand what drives emotions before they take hold. Without this, lasting fulfillment is impossible. The next step is clear: knowing oneself as the key to emotional mastery. Contentment is not a surface-level achievement. It is not simply about removing desires or detaching from external validation. It is something far deeper, something that requires a person to look inward with absolute clarity. Without self-awareness, contentment becomes fragile, easily disturbed by unknown fears, unresolved emotions, and hidden expectations. A person cannot master their emotions if they do not fully understand where those emotions come from, why they arise, and how they shape behavior. Many people go through life reacting without ever questioning why. They feel anger and assume the world is to blame. They feel sadness and assume something external must be missing. They feel unfulfilled and assume they need more success, more attention, more achievement. But few ever ask, what within me is making me feel this way? This question is the foundation of emotional mastery. A Stoic does not just manage their reactions. They trace them back to their roots, uncovering the hidden beliefs, fears, and assumptions that shape every emotional response. Self-awareness is not a vague concept. It is the ability to see oneself without distortion. Most people believe they know themselves, but what they truly know is a story they have told themselves about who they are. They believe they are a certain kind of person, good, strong, fair, disciplined, without ever testing whether these beliefs hold up under pressure. They see their actions as justified, their opinions as logical, their emotions as valid, without realizing how much of their behavior is driven by unconscious biases, unexamined fears, and emotional conditioning. A Stoic seeks the truth, not the version of truth that is comfortable, but the one that is undeniable. They do not flinch when they see their flaws. They do not excuse their weaknesses. They do not hide from the parts of themselves that are uncomfortable to face. They recognize that self-awareness is not about affirming one's own image. It is about stripping away every illusion until only what is real remains. The first layer of self-awareness is recognizing that emotions are signals, not identities. Many people say, I am an anxious person, I am an impatient person, I am a jealous person. But these are not truths. They are emotional states that have been reinforced through repetition. No one is born anxious or impatient. These are learned responses, strengthened by habit, by experience, by belief. A Stoic does not say, I am this way. They say, I have trained myself to react this way, and therefore I can train myself differently. Most suffering comes from misunderstanding oneself. A person believes they are upset because of a situation, when in reality they are upset because the situation challenges their self-image. They believe they are frustrated because of external obstacles, when in truth they are frustrated because they expected things to be easier. They believe they are sad because they lack something, when the real cause of sadness is an attachment to an idea of how life should be. A Stoic does not accept emotions at face value. They question them, break them apart, trace them back to their origin. Another layer of self-awareness is recognizing which fears control decisions. Many people avoid difficult conversations, not because they are incapable of having them, but because they fear conflict. They hold back from pursuing goals, not because they lack skill, but because they fear failure. They seek validation, not because they need it, but because they fear rejection. A Stoic asks, "What am I truly afraid of? Where does this fear come from? Is it even real, or is it something I have carried with me without questioning?" The moment a fear is seen clearly, it loses its power. A person who lacks self-awareness is easily controlled by the world. They are manipulated by compliments, wounded by criticism, swayed by the emotions of those around them. They do not know why they react the way they do, and because of this, they believe they have no control over it. They assume that if something triggers them, then the trigger is to blame. But a Stoic understands that the trigger is irrelevant. It is the unexamined weakness inside that allows the trigger to work. A major barrier to self-awareness is the fear of seeing one's own flaws. Many people avoid introspection because they do not want to face the parts of themselves that they do not like. They would rather believe that they are good, that they are right, that their actions are justified. But growth is impossible without confrontation. A Stoic does not protect their ego, they destroy it. They do not hide from their weaknesses. They expose them so that they can be corrected. They do not run from discomfort. They see it as a path to greater understanding. Self-awareness is not just about thoughts and emotions. It is also about patterns of behavior. A person may say they want to be disciplined, but if their actions show inconsistency, then their words mean nothing. A person may say they value honesty, but if they soften the truth to protect their image, then they have deceived themselves. A Stoic compares who they believe themselves to be with what their actions actually prove. If there is a gap, they do not make excuses, they correct it. One of the greatest barriers to self-awareness is the illusion of righteousness. People assume that because they feel strongly about something, they must be correct. But emotions do not equal truth. A person can feel offended and still be wrong. They can feel justified and still be acting from ego. They can feel certain and still be blind to reality. A Stoic does not trust emotional certainty. They constantly test their own beliefs, question their own perspectives, and challenge their own biases. They do not assume that because they think something, it must be true. True self-awareness requires detachment from identity. Many people hold on to labels, strong, kind, intelligent, successful, without realizing that these labels create blind spots. If a person believes they are strong, they may refuse to acknowledge moments of weakness. If they believe they are kind, they may ignore the times they act selfishly. If they believe they are intelligent, they may resist learning from others. A Stoic does not attach to an identity, they attach to truth. If their actions contradict their self-image, they adjust their self-image, not their actions. One of the most overlooked aspects of self-awareness is understanding desires. Many believe they want success, but what they truly want is respect. They believe they want wealth, but what they truly seek is security. They believe they want recognition, but what they truly need is self-acceptance. A Stoic does not chase desires blindly. They ask, what do I actually seek? Is this something external, or is it something internal that I am trying to fill with the wrong solution? Self-awareness also means recognizing how one affects others. Many assume they are good people because they do not intend harm. But actions, not intentions, define impact. A person may think they are being helpful, but if their help creates dependence, they have weakened the other person. They may think they are being protective, but if their protection comes at the cost of another's growth, they have harmed them. A Stoic does not measure themselves by their intentions alone. They measure themselves by results. Mastering emotional control is impossible without self-awareness. A person cannot fix what they refuse to see. They cannot grow if they protect their ego. They cannot change what they do not question. A Stoic does not assume they are above error. They seek out their blind spots, expose their weaknesses, and confront their own illusions. They know that ignorance of the self is the root of all suffering. Without deep self-awareness, everything else is built on a weak foundation. Emotional regulation becomes fragile. Contentment becomes unreliable. Strength becomes an illusion. But once a person sees themselves clearly, once they strip away false narratives and emotional distortions, they gain something rare, absolute clarity. They no longer act out of habit, no longer react out of blindness, no longer move through life controlled by forces they do not understand. This is not a one-time realization. It is a continuous process. Every day a Stoic reflects, questions, and refines. They do not assume they have arrived. They assume there is always more to uncover. With each layer, they strip away. They come closer to something invaluable, unshakable mastery over their own mind. True self-awareness is not just about understanding emotions, desires, or habits. It extends deeper into the way a person interacts with the world. It shapes how one engages with others, how they recharge, how they balance solitude with social connection. Many assume that personality is fixed, that being introverted or extroverted is simply an unchangeable trait. But this belief limits growth. A Stoic does not simply accept labels. They study their nature, question their tendencies, and find balance between extremes. Society often glorifies one side over the other. Extroverts are celebrated for their energy, their charisma, their ability to network and command attention. Introverts are praised for their depth, their thoughtfulness, their ability to work alone. But both can be weaknesses if left unchecked. A person who relies too much on external stimulation loses the ability to find peace within. A person who avoids interaction too often may struggle to apply their insights in the real world. The key is not choosing one over the other. It is developing the ability to move between them when necessary. Many believe introverts are withdrawn by nature, but this is not always the case. Some seek solitude not because they prefer it, but because they have been drained by excessive social expectations. Others avoid interaction because they fear judgment, rejection, or discomfort. A Stoic does not allow fear to dictate behavior. If they avoid people, it is not because they are afraid. It is because they have chosen solitude as a tool for growth, for reflection, for mastery over their inner world. Extroverts, on the other hand, may thrive in social settings but struggle in stillness. Many need the presence of others to feel alive, using constant engagement as a way to avoid self-reflection. This creates a dependence on external energy, making them vulnerable when alone. A Stoic does not allow themselves to be weakened by habit. If they enjoy company, they ensure it is a conscious choice, not a necessity. If they find peace in solitude, they ensure it is not an escape, but a form of discipline. One of the most important aspects of balance is knowing when to withdraw and when to engage. There is a time for deep reflection, for silence, for turning inward. There is also a time for participation, for discussion, for stepping into the world and contributing to it. A Stoic moves between these states fluidly, adjusting as needed. They do not cling to one extreme out of comfort. They train themselves to be comfortable both in solitude and in the presence of others. Many assume that solitude is a sign of detachment, that those who spend too much time alone are disconnected from reality. But solitude, when used correctly, is not disconnection. It is a sharpening of the mind. It allows space for thought, for clarity, for self-examination. The greatest thinkers, warriors, and leaders in history all knew the value of stepping away from the noise of the world. A Stoic does not fear solitude, nor do they avoid it. They embrace it as a necessary part of mastery. On the other hand, engagement with others is not a distraction. It is a test. It reveals weaknesses, exposes blind spots, sharpens emotional control. It is easy to be composed in isolation, but real discipline is tested in the presence of others. A Stoic does not avoid society just because it is flawed. They engage with it when necessary, applying their principles, practicing patience, and refining their ability to remain steady amidst external forces. Balance between introversion and extroversion also requires understanding what drains energy and what restores it. Many assume that social interaction is exhausting for introverts and energizing for extroverts. But this is not always true. The key is not the presence of people, but the quality of interaction. Shallow, meaningless conversations leave both introverts and extroverts feeling empty. Deep, meaningful discussions enrich both. A Stoic does not waste time in engagements that offer nothing of value. They choose their interactions carefully, ensuring that they leave stronger, not weaker. A major challenge in finding balance is recognizing the difference between preference and avoidance. Many assume that they prefer to be alone, when in reality they are avoiding conflict, discomfort, or vulnerability. Others assume they prefer constant engagement when in reality they are avoiding being alone with their thoughts. A Stoic confronts these tendencies with brutal honesty. They do not allow comfort to become weakness. They do not let preference turn into limitation. They push themselves toward what strengthens, not what feels easiest. A person who spends too much time in solitude may become disconnected from the realities of human nature. They may grow impatient with others, assuming they are above social interaction. But true mastery is not withdrawing from the world. It is learning to move through it without being disturbed by it. A Stoic does not avoid society. They navigate it without losing themselves in it. On the other hand, those who rely too much on external engagement may lose their ability to think independently. If every opinion is shaped by others, if every decision is influenced by the crowd, then individuality is lost. A Stoic is never fully dependent on external voices. They engage, they listen, they observe, but they do not need constant reinforcement. They return to solitude to refine their thoughts, to ensure they are acting from reason, not external influence. Another key lesson in balancing introversion and extroversion is learning to protect one's energy. Many people exhaust themselves by giving too much to others, by engaging in every conversation, by feeling obligated to always be available. A Stoic does not allow their energy to be wasted. They understand that focus is limited, that emotional reserves are not infinite. They learn to say no to what drains them, reserving their time for what truly matters. At the same time, balance requires knowing when to open up. Many avoid connection out of fear of being misunderstood or hurt. But complete isolation creates a life without depth. A Stoic does not fear vulnerability. They simply ensure that they choose wisely who to share it with. They do not give their energy freely to anyone who demands it. They are selective, discerning, ensuring that they invest in relationships that are built on trust, strength, and mutual respect. Finding inner balance between these two forces is not about choosing one over the other. It is about developing the ability to thrive in both, to be able to think deeply in solitude and to hold one's ground in the presence of others, to enjoy the company of people without needing it, to be alone without feeling lost, to move between worlds with ease, adapting not out of weakness, but out of deliberate control. This balance is one of the greatest tests of emotional stability. A Stoic does not let solitude turn into isolation, nor do they let socialization turn into dependence. They walk through life with awareness of what strengthens them and what weakens them. They know when to retreat to sharpen their mind, and when to step forward to refine their ability to apply what they have learned. Those who master this balance are rare. They do not crave attention, but they do not fear it either. They do not reject solitude, but they do not hide in it. They are steady, whether surrounded by people or entirely alone. They do not seek to escape into one extreme or the other. They are centered, grounded, unshaken. Mastering emotional control through self-awareness is one step. Learning to balance solitude and engagement is another. But applying this mastery to the world, to relationships, to conflicts, requires something deeper. Understanding one's personality, not as a fixed identity, but as a tool that can be adapted, strengthened, and refined. Balance between introversion and extroversion is not just about social preference, it is about adaptability. The ability to function in solitude or in the company of others is a reflection of emotional intelligence, the deeper understanding of one's mind and emotions. But this intelligence is not just about knowing oneself. It is about navigating life's challenges without being emotionally destabilized. A Stoic does not move through life with a rigid identity, reacting the same way in every situation. They adapt, not out of weakness, but out of strategic mastery over their emotions. Life is unpredictable. Every person will face setbacks, unexpected obstacles, difficult people, and moments of deep internal struggle. Many believe personality is fixed, that a person simply is the way they are, unable to change their reactions or tendencies. But this belief traps people in their own habits, leaving them powerless to improve. A Stoic refuses to accept this limitation. They do not cling to the idea that their personality is permanent. They refine it, sharpen it, mold it into something stronger, more adaptable, and more disciplined. Emotional intelligence is not about controlling how one feels. It is about controlling how one responds. Everyone will feel anger, frustration, sadness, disappointment, and fear. These emotions cannot be removed, nor should they be. They are signals, indicators of something happening within. But while most people are ruled by these emotions, allowing them to dictate their behavior, a Stoic separates emotion from reaction. They acknowledge the feeling, but they do not obey it. They recognize frustration, but do not lash out. They feel fear, but do not let it paralyze them. They experience disappointment, but do not let it turn into despair. This ability to process emotion without surrendering to it is a defining trait of emotional intelligence. It allows a person to remain steady, to make rational decisions, and to avoid being easily manipulated by external forces. Many react impulsively, believing their emotions to be absolute truths. But a Stoic questions everything. They do not assume their first reaction is the correct one. They analyze, they step back, they observe themselves as if from the outside, asking, "What am I feeling? Where is this coming from? Is this reaction useful?" Personality is not an excuse for lack of self-control. Many believe that because they are naturally impatient, anxious, or reactive, they have no choice but to behave in those ways. But personality is not destiny. It is a set of habits, mental patterns, and conditioned responses that can be unlearned and replaced. A Stoic does not say, "This is just the way I am." They say, "This is the way I have trained myself to be, and therefore I can train myself differently." One of the most dangerous emotional traps is identifying too closely with emotion itself. Many say, "I am an anxious person, I am an angry person, I am a sensitive person." But these are not fixed traits. They are simply reinforced reactions. A Stoic recognizes that thoughts and behaviors are malleable. They train themselves to be flexible, not rigid, understanding that emotional intelligence is not about suppressing feelings, but about shaping responses in a way that serves rather than harms. To adapt to life's challenges, a person must release attachment to how they believe things should be. Many suffer not because of reality, but because reality does not match their expectations. They assume success should be easy, that people should be fair, that life should go according to plan. When these expectations are broken, they suffer not because of what happened, but because of their own attachment to an imagined version of how things were supposed to be. A Stoic eliminates this unnecessary suffering by removing rigid expectations. They accept what is, rather than clinging to what they wished for. This does not mean passivity. Emotional intelligence is not about accepting everything without action. It is about understanding what is within control and what is not. A Stoic does not waste energy resisting the inevitable, nor do they spend effort trying to change what cannot be changed. They focus only on what can be influenced, their thoughts, their actions, and their perspective. This gives them immense control over their internal world, allowing them to remain composed even in the face of external chaos. Many people allow their personality to be shaped by external validation. They behave differently depending on who is watching. They change their opinions based on approval. They shift their emotional state depending on how others react to them. But a Stoic builds their personality on internal foundations, not external reinforcement. They are not swayed by trends, not manipulated by peer pressure, not dependent on being liked. Their emotional stability is rooted in something unshakable, their own principles. One of the greatest challenges in life is handling criticism and judgment. Many struggle with this because they tie their identity to the opinions of others. They feel validated when praised, but devastated when criticized. A Stoic removes this dependence. They ask, "Is this criticism true? If so, I will learn from it. If not, it is irrelevant." They do not feel the need to defend their ego against every comment. They do not waste energy convincing others of their worth. They know their own value, and that is enough. Emotional intelligence requires mastery over emotional triggers. Everyone has certain things that immediately provoke a reaction, topics that make them angry, comments that make them defensive, situations that make them anxious. Most people react automatically without thinking. A Stoic, however, studies their triggers. They break them apart. They ask, why does this provoke me? What belief is being challenged? Am I reacting based on reason or habit? By dissecting the source of the reaction, they remove its power. Adaptability is also about understanding the emotional state of others. Many conflicts arise not because of logical disagreements, but because people react emotionally to each other. Someone speaks in anger, and the other person responds with more anger. Someone is defensive, and the other becomes aggressive. A Stoic does not escalate. They recognize when another person is being driven by emotion rather than reason. Instead of reacting impulsively, they remain composed, neutral, choosing their response deliberately rather than falling into an emotional battle. Emotional intelligence is tested in the face of adversity. It is easy to remain calm when everything is going well. It is easy to be disciplined when there are no temptations. It is easy to be patient when there is nothing to be frustrated about. But the real test is how one responds when challenged, when faced with difficulty, when emotions rise uncontrollably. A Stoic does not wait for the moment of crisis to build control. They train daily. They prepare for difficulty before it arrives, knowing that emotional mastery is not something one turns on when needed, but something that must already be a deeply ingrained habit. Personality is not something a person is born with and forced to accept. It is something that is shaped, refined, and strengthened over time. Those who refuse to change are those who refuse to grow. Those who believe they are fixed in place remain trapped in their own patterns. But those who understand that emotions, thoughts, and behaviors can be reshaped gain an incredible power, the ability to choose who they become. Adapting to life's challenges is not about bending to every circumstance, nor is it about resisting reality. It is about navigating the world with intelligence, resilience, and clarity. It is about remaining steady without being rigid, flexible without being weak, composed without being indifferent. A Stoic does not see difficulties as obstacles. They see them as tests of character, opportunities for growth, and sharpening stones for discipline. Many believe that emotional intelligence is simply about self-control, but it is more than that. It is the ability to move through life with deep understanding, to regulate oneself without being rigid, to adapt to changing circumstances without losing inner stability. It is the difference between being controlled by emotions and using emotions as tools for higher reasoning. Emotional intelligence is not just about self-mastery and solitude. It is tested in interaction, in communication, in how a person responds to others, especially in an age where so much of human connection happens through screens. The modern world has created a new battlefield for emotional control, one where words are exchanged instantly, where tone is lost in text, and where misunderstandings arise from the smallest assumptions. Digital communication has changed how people form relationships, how they express emotion, and how they handle conflict. A Stoic must learn to navigate this world with clarity, discipline, and self-awareness. Many approach texting and online interaction with unexamined emotional habits. They react instantly to messages, interpreting words through the filter of their own mood. A simple delay in response creates frustration. A short reply is seen as coldness. The absence of emojis is taken as indifference. The mind fills in gaps, assuming the worst, generating unnecessary tension. But none of these reactions are based on truth. They are based on emotionally charged assumptions. A Stoic does not fall into this trap. They do not read too deeply into messages, nor do they allow digital interactions to dictate their mood. They remain steady, refusing to let their emotions be pulled by the inconsistency of online communication. A major test of emotional control is the ability to resist impulsive response. Many feel an immediate urge to reply to messages, to clarify misunderstandings, to defend themselves against misinterpretation, but this impulse often leads to reactivity rather than reason. A Stoic knows that not every message requires an immediate answer. They recognize that silence can be more powerful than response, that restraint prevents unnecessary conflict, that choosing when and how to engage is a mark of mastery. They do not allow the pressure of quick replies to dictate their actions. One of the greatest sources of emotional instability in texting and relationships is the expectation of instant validation. Many rely on messaging to feel connected, to feel important, to feel wanted. When a response is delayed, insecurity creeps in. When a message is seen but not answered, overthinking takes over. But these reactions reveal dependence on external reassurance. A Stoic does not tie their emotional state to the responsiveness of others. They do not need constant affirmation. They do not measure their worth by how quickly someone replies. They understand that true confidence is being unaffected by external fluctuations. Digital communication has created an illusion of intimacy. People exchange words constantly, but often without depth. Conversations are reduced to fragments, to surface-level exchanges that lack true connection. Many mistake constant messaging for meaningful relationships, believing that presence in a chat equates to presence in life. But real connection is not built on frequency of interaction. It is built on quality of understanding. A Stoic values depth over repetition. They do not engage in empty conversations just for the sake of filling silence. They seek clarity, purpose, and intention in their interactions. Another challenge in texting and relationships is the misinterpretation of words. Without tone, without body language, without the nuance of spoken conversation, messages are often read through the filter of the reader's current emotions. A neutral statement can be taken as cold. A simple question can be seen as criticism. A lack of punctuation can be mistaken for anger. This leads to unnecessary conflict, where people argue over what they assume was meant, rather than what was actually said. A Stoic does not assume meaning based on emotion. They clarify rather than react, ensuring that they respond to reality, not projection. One of the greatest skills in digital communication is knowing when not to engage. Many fall into the trap of endless arguments, trying to prove a point, trying to correct misunderstandings, trying to convince others of their perspective. But not all conversations are productive. Some are fueled by ego, by defensiveness, by the need to be right rather than the desire to understand. A Stoic does not waste energy in pointless exchanges. They know that silence is often a stronger answer than words, that some arguments are not worth having, that true power lies in choosing what deserves attention and what can be ignored. A major emotional challenge in texting and online communication is the attachment to approval. Many craft messages carefully, not for clarity, but for acceptance. They overthink their words, worrying about how they will be perceived. They seek validation in responses, measuring their worth by how others react. But this creates dependence on external opinion, a fragile state where emotional stability is placed in the hands of others. A Stoic does not need approval to feel secure. They speak with honesty, clarity, and self-respect, unbothered by whether their words are liked or praised. Another test of emotional strength in digital interaction is the ability to handle criticism or coldness without emotional reaction. Many take short responses personally. They assume someone's distance is a reflection of their own worth. They overanalyze, creating unnecessary anxiety over words that likely held no deeper meaning. But a Stoic does not let their emotions be dictated by the tone of a message. They do not assume the worst, nor do they overvalue small interactions. They remain grounded, knowing that true self-worth is not dependent on how others communicate. One of the greatest weaknesses in digital communication is emotional venting without purpose. Many use messaging as a way to unload frustration, to seek instant comfort, to gain validation in their emotional struggles. But unfiltered venting often leads to escalation rather than resolution. A Stoic does not use communication as an emotional dumping ground. They process their emotions before speaking, ensuring that their words add value rather than spread chaos. They do not seek comfort through reaction. They seek clarity through understanding. The nature of relationships in the digital world has created a new kind of emotional instability, the addiction to presence. Many feel uneasy when messages go unanswered, when communication is inconsistent, when engagement is not immediate. This creates a constant state of anticipation where peace is disrupted by the need for reassurance. But a Stoic does not base their stability on another person's availability. They do not need constant reminders of their importance. They are secure in themselves, unaffected by temporary silence. Many believe that texting builds relationships, but in reality, it can often weaken them. It replaces face-to-face interaction, removes the depth of real conversation, and creates a false sense of closeness. Many assume that because they communicate often, they know a person deeply. But true understanding comes not from messages, but from presence, from action, from shared experiences. A Stoic does not let digital conversation replace genuine connection. They ensure that their relationships are built on more than words on a screen. A key aspect of Stoic communication is the ability to let go of what is out of control. People will misinterpret messages. Some will take offense where none was intended. Others will use online interactions to provoke, to insult, to spread negativity. A Stoic does not waste time trying to control the uncontrollable. They do not explain themselves unnecessarily. They do not chase after clarity that others are unwilling to receive. They speak clearly, honestly, and with intention, and beyond that, they let go. The modern world has created an obsession with response. Many feel an obligation to reply immediately, to be available at all times, to keep up with every message. But this creates constant distraction, a mind that is always waiting, always checking, always engaged in digital noise. A Stoic does not live at the mercy of notifications. They set boundaries, deciding when and how they communicate. They own their attention rather than surrendering it to digital demands. Many conflicts arise not from reality, but from assumed meaning in text. A Stoic does not assume. They do not let emotions dictate interpretation. They ask, clarify, and move forward without unnecessary reaction. They refuse to let their peace be disrupted by what is likely nothing more than a misunderstanding. Digital communication is not just about exchanging words. It is a reflection of one's discipline, patience, and self-control. A person who cannot master their emotions in messaging will struggle to master them in real life. Every interaction is a test, an opportunity to refine awareness, to strengthen restraint, to practice detachment from fleeting emotions. Mastery of digital communication is not just about self-control in messaging. It is about deeper emotional intelligence. It reveals how a person manages frustration, how they react to misunderstandings, and how they interpret the words of others. But beyond this external discipline, there is a greater internal conflict that many struggle with: the battle between emotional suppression and permission to feel. Many misunderstand Stoicism, assuming that it teaches suppression, that to be strong is to feel nothing, to deny all emotion, to become cold and indifferent. But this is not mastery. It is avoidance. Stoicism does not demand that a person shut down their emotions. Instead, it asks a different question. How does one experience emotion without being ruled by it? Most people fall into one of two extremes. Some suppress emotion entirely, believing that feeling deeply is a weakness. They avoid confronting pain, dismiss sadness, and force themselves into an artificial state of detachment. Others, in contrast, allow emotions to control them, believing that to feel is to be completely consumed by what is felt. They justify outbursts, embrace volatility, and mistake intensity for authenticity. But neither extreme leads to true mastery. One creates a numb existence, the other a chaotic life. The Stoic path is different. It is balance, not avoidance, discipline, not denial. Many suppress emotions because they fear them. They associate sadness with vulnerability, anger with loss of control, love with dependence. They convince themselves that shutting down feelings will make them unshakable, but this approach has consequences. Suppression does not eliminate emotion, it buries it, and what is buried does not disappear. It festers, waiting for a moment to resurface. A person who suppresses grief may feel nothing in the moment, but later, that unprocessed pain will manifest in ways they do not expect. Insomnia, resentment, detachment from others, a growing numbness that makes life feel meaningless. Stoicism does not teach suppression, it teaches understanding. It does not tell a person to feel nothing, but to see emotions for what they are: temporary, often irrational, but also informative. Emotions are signals. Anger reveals a perceived injustice. Fear highlights an area of uncertainty. Sadness points to attachment. But signals are not commands. A Stoic does not ignore these signals, nor do they obey them blindly. Instead, they ask, "What is this emotion trying to tell me, and what is the best response?" Those who allow emotions to dictate their actions often believe they are being authentic. They say, "I am just expressing how I feel." But unchecked emotion is not honesty. It is reactivity. A person who lashes out in anger is not showing strength. They are revealing that their emotions have greater control over them than their own reasoning. A Stoic does not ignore anger, but they also do not let it drive them into destructive action. They acknowledge it, understand its source, and choose their response from wisdom, not impulse. A key difference between suppression and discipline is whether an emotion is processed or ignored. Suppression refuses to engage with the feeling at all. It denies its existence, labeling it as weakness. Discipline, however, acknowledges emotion fully, but refuses to let it distort perception or control behavior. The goal is not to eliminate emotion, but to develop the ability to experience it without being destabilized by it. One of the greatest dangers of suppression is that it creates emotional detachment from life itself. Those who cut themselves off from feeling do not only avoid pain, they also limit joy, love, connection, and meaning. They become indifferent not only to hardship but to everything. A life without feeling is not strength, it is emptiness. A Stoic does not seek indifference, they seek mastery. They experience deeply, but they do not allow themselves to be enslaved by feeling. Many fear that if they permit themselves to feel fully, they will lose control. They believe that if they acknowledge grief, they will drown in it, that if they accept anger, they will be consumed by it, that if they embrace love, they will become dependent. But this fear comes from misunderstanding emotion. Emotions are not something to be avoided or surrendered to. They are something to be understood and directed. A person who suppresses sadness does not make themselves strong. They simply delay the moment when that sadness will demand to be felt. A person who allows anger to drive their actions does not make themselves powerful. They make themselves easy to manipulate. A Stoic recognizes both extremes and avoids them. They say, "I will allow myself to feel, but I will not be controlled by what I feel." True emotional intelligence requires engagement, not avoidance. It requires the ability to sit with discomfort, to fully experience an emotion without letting it dictate thought or action. Many try to escape from emotion by distraction, entertainment, work, substance, social media. But avoidance does not create peace. It simply postpones the confrontation. A Stoic does not run from difficult emotions. They turn toward them, face them fully, process them deeply, and then let them pass. One of the most effective ways to balance emotion is detachment from identity. Many suffer because they attach emotions to their sense of self. They say, "I am an anxious person. I am an angry person. I am a sensitive person." But these are not identities. They are passing states. A person who believes they are defined by their emotions will struggle to regulate them. A Stoic does not say, "I am this emotion." They say, "I am experiencing this emotion, and it will pass." This shift in perspective removes the illusion of permanence, allowing emotions to be felt without being attached to. A major part of Stoic philosophy is examining the source of emotions. Many feel anger but never ask, "Why does this anger me?" They feel hurt but never question, "What expectation was broken?" They feel fear but never explore, "Is this fear rational?" A Stoic does not simply experience emotion. They break it apart, analyze it, find its roots. They seek clarity, asking whether the feeling is based on reality or distortion. In doing so, they take control of what most people allow to control them. One of the most powerful ways to process emotion without suppression is Stoic journaling. Writing emotions down forces clarity. It turns feelings into words, making them easier to understand and analyze. Many who suppress emotions believe they have dealt with them, but when forced to write, they realize how much remains unresolved. The act of putting emotions into words removes their chaos, allowing the mind to see them objectively rather than being overwhelmed by them. Another crucial practice is mindful observation of emotion. Instead of reacting immediately, a Stoic creates space between feeling and response. They observe the emotion as if it belonged to someone else, removing personal attachment. They do not say, "I am angry." They say, "There is anger within me. What is its source? What is its purpose?" This creates a gap where reasoning can step in, where logic can temper feeling, where clarity can replace reactivity. Many believe that emotional control means feeling less, but true mastery is not feeling less. It is feeling fully without losing control. It is the ability to experience pain without being broken by it, to feel anger without being consumed by it, to love deeply without losing one's sense of self, to grieve without falling into despair, to move through emotions as a disciplined observer rather than as a helpless participant. The key is not to suppress or to indulge, but to develop a steady center that emotions pass through without leaving destruction behind. A Stoic does not resist emotion, but they also do not worship it. They allow themselves to experience life fully, to embrace every emotion with openness and discipline. They understand that emotions are part of existence, but they do not define existence. Mastering emotions is not just about self-awareness and discipline. It is about guidance. The ability to feel deeply without being ruled by emotions, to process without suppressing, and to respond without reacting is something few achieve alone. Throughout history, those who sought mastery over their own mind understood that learning from those who had already walked the path was essential. No one reaches true emotional strength in isolation. They refine themselves by observing, questioning, and absorbing wisdom from those who have already conquered the challenges they face. Many attempt to navigate emotions without structure, relying only on their instincts, hoping to develop control through trial and error. But this approach is slow, unstable, and often leads to unnecessary suffering. A Stoic does not stumble through life without direction. They seek out teachers, not in the conventional sense, but in the form of wisdom that has stood the test of time. They find an emotions mentor, a guiding force that shapes their understanding, offering clarity in moments of confusion and discipline in moments of weakness. A mentor does not have to be someone physically present. Throughout history, the greatest minds have left behind their thoughts, principles, and methods for emotional mastery. Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and Epictetus all acted as teachers, not just for their time, but for every generation that followed. Their writings offer lessons on how to remain composed in difficulty, how to process emotions without becoming a slave to them, and how to develop the inner strength that keeps a person steady even in life's greatest storms. A Stoic does not wait for wisdom to find them. They seek it out, absorbing the experiences of those who have already learned what they need to master. Most people struggle with emotions not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack perspective. They assume their problems are unique, that their emotions are different, that no one could possibly understand what they feel. This belief isolates them, making emotional control even harder. But those who study the Stoics quickly realize that human nature has not changed. The same struggles with fear, anger, loss, and attachment existed thousands of years ago. The only difference is that those who came before left behind strategies to navigate these emotions. A Stoic does not assume they must figure everything out on their own. They use the wisdom of the past to gain mastery over the present. One of the most effective ways to find an emotions mentor is to read the words of those who lived through greater challenges and remained unshaken. Marcus Aurelius faced war, betrayal, political chaos, and personal loss. Yet his meditations are filled with thoughts of patience, perspective, and composure. Epictetus was born into slavery, yet he developed an unbreakable philosophy that taught him to remain unaffected by external circumstances. Seneca, despite living in a time of extreme political danger, mastered the art of emotional detachment, teaching that suffering comes not from events, but from how we interpret them. To study their words is to receive direct mentorship from minds that proved their strength under the most extreme conditions. But wisdom is not absorbed passively. A person does not become emotionally strong simply by reading about it. A true student of Stoicism applies what they learn, testing it in daily life, refining their responses, and questioning their instincts. It is not enough to read that anger should be examined before acted upon. One must practice it in the moment of irritation. It is not enough to understand that fear is often exaggerated by the mind. One must confront their fears with reason when they arise. The true test of emotional mastery is action, not knowledge. A Stoic does not just admire wisdom, they embody it. An emotions mentor does not always have to be a historical figure. Many find guidance in those around them, observing those who handle life with grace, patience, and control. A person who remains calm under pressure, who doesn't allow external events to shake their peace, who speaks with clarity instead of reaction, this is someone worth learning from. Many waste time absorbing the behaviors of those who are emotionally volatile, adopting impatience, insecurity, and instability simply because they are surrounded by it. A Stoic chooses their influences deliberately, ensuring that they are shaped by strength, not weakness. A key part of mentorship is learning from contrast. While it is useful to study those who demonstrate emotional mastery, it is just as important to observe those who fail to control their emotions. Watching someone lose themselves in anger, make impulsive decisions, or allow external events to dictate their inner peace is a powerful lesson in what not to do. A Stoic learns just as much from observing failure as they do from witnessing strength. They do not judge, they study. Every emotionally unstable person becomes an example of what must be avoided. One of the greatest tests of emotional intelligence is self-correction. A student of Stoicism does not just learn from others, they learn from themselves. They reflect on their own emotional missteps, analyzing moments where they reacted rather than responded, where they let emotion take control rather than discipline. They study their own weaknesses without self-condemnation, not with guilt, but with a commitment to improvement. Every mistake becomes a lesson. Every failure in emotional control becomes an opportunity for refinement. A Stoic does not seek perfection, they seek progress. Another powerful tool in emotional mastery is Stoic journaling. Writing thoughts down forces clarity, turning vague emotions into concrete words. Marcus Aurelius himself used this practice, writing meditations not for an audience, but for himself, as a way to reinforce discipline over his own mind. A Stoic who journals does not just record events, they analyze their reactions, question their assumptions, and refine their emotional responses. Each entry becomes a lesson, a way to track progress and identify patterns that must be corrected. Finding an emotions mentor is not about following one person blindly. It is about extracting wisdom from multiple sources, combining philosophy, observation, and self-reflection into a system of growth. Some lessons come from books, some from experience, some from the mistakes of others. A Stoic curates their influences, ensuring that every piece of wisdom absorbed strengthens their ability to remain unshaken. A true Stoic never assumes they have mastered emotional control. They remain a student, constantly refining, constantly learning, constantly sharpening their ability to remain steady in all circumstances. The moment a person believes they have nothing left to learn, they begin to regress. The greatest minds in history never stopped learning, never stopped improving. A Stoic follows this path, understanding that mastery is a lifelong pursuit, not a single achievement. The value of an emotions mentor is not in the mentor themselves, it is in how one applies what is learned. To read without action is useless. To admire strength without developing it is a waste. A Stoic does not just consume wisdom, they live it. They test their understanding in the real world, applying principles in the face of real challenges, ensuring that every lesson is integrated, every insight is tested. Emotional mastery is not just about control. It is about understanding the true nature of emotions, breaking them down to their source, stripping away illusions, and seeing them for what they really are. Many struggle with emotions not because they are weak, but because they misidentify what they are truly feeling. They mistake frustration for stress, insecurity for anger, attachment for love. They react to the surface without questioning the cause. A Stoic doesn't fall into this trap. They go deeper. They dissect emotion at its root, ensuring that their responses are not based on misunderstanding, but on clarity. People often say they feel stressed. They blame external circumstances, their job, their responsibilities, their environment. But stress is rarely about what is happening. It is about how one perceives what is happening. It is not the workload that creates tension, but the belief that one cannot handle it. It is not the demands of life that create exhaustion, but resistance to them. When a Stoic experiences stress, they do not say, "This is happening to me." They say, "What within me is making me react this way?" The moment they do this, they regain control. They see that stress is not about the external world. It is about internal resistance to what is already occurring. One of the most commonly misunderstood emotions is envy. Many believe envy is about wanting what someone else has, but at its core, envy is not about external things. It is about comparison, insecurity, and false expectations. A person does not envy because they lack. They envy because they believe they should already have. The frustration is not in another person's success, but in the perceived failure of oneself. A Stoic doesn't waste time in envy. They see it as a distortion of perspective, a distraction from their own path, a mental weakness that serves no purpose. Many believe anger comes from injustice, that it is a justified response to wrongdoing. But anger, at its root, is often unmet expectation. People become angry not because something unfair happened, but because they believed it shouldn't have. They assumed life would be different. They expected fairness. They demanded control. When a Stoic feels anger rising, they do not suppress it, nor do they obey it. They ask, what expectation was broken? Was this expectation realistic? And most of the time they find that the anger was built on illusion, not reality. Fear is another emotion that is often misinterpreted. People assume fear is about external danger, that it is a natural response to something threatening. But most fear is not about what is happening. It is about what might happen. It is the mind projecting danger into the future, attaching to possibilities rather than facts. A Stoic sees fear as nothing more than a mental projection. They ask, is this fear based on something real, or is it just my mind creating an unnecessary story? The moment they see fear for what it is, a future illusion rather than a present reality, it begins to lose power. Sadness is often mistaken for loss. People believe they are sad because something is missing, because something has been taken from them. But sadness is rarely about the event itself. It is about attachment to what was expected. It is the mind resisting change, holding on to a version of reality that no longer exists. A Stoic does not avoid sadness, nor do they let it consume them. They ask, what am I truly mourning? Am I sad because of the loss itself, or because I refuse to accept what is? They recognize that grief is not about the external world. It is about the unwillingness to move forward. Guilt is another emotion that can deceive. People assume guilt is about wrongdoing, about making a mistake. But guilt is often not about the action. It is about identity. Many feel guilt not because they believe what they did was truly wrong, but because they believe it conflicts with their self-image. They say, "I should have known better. I am not the kind of person who makes these mistakes." Guilt, then, is often not about moral failure, but about ego. A Stoic doesn't waste time in guilt. They correct what can be corrected, they learn from what has happened, and they move forward without self-condemnation. Disappointment is another emotion that often masquerades as something else. People assume they are disappointed because someone failed them, because something did not go as planned. But disappointment, at its root, is expectation meeting reality and losing. A Stoic does not cling to rigid expectations. They do not demand that the world conform to their desires. When something does not go as planned, they do not see it as failure. They see it as a lesson, a test, an opportunity for adjustment. They do not allow disappointment to turn into resentment, because they accept reality instead of resisting it. Jealousy is often mistaken for love. Many believe that feeling possessive, feeling threatened, feeling protective over a relationship is a sign of deep care. But jealousy is not about love. It is about fear, insecurity, and control. A Stoic does not confuse attachment with genuine connection. They understand that love is not about ownership, that security in relationships does not come from controlling another person, but from being internally secure, regardless of the actions of others. Many who struggle with motivation assume they are simply lazy, that they lack discipline. But lack of motivation is often not about laziness. It is about lack of clarity. A person who feels uninspired, unmotivated, resistant to action, is usually someone who has not fully defined what they want or why they want it. A Stoic doesn't sit in inaction waiting for motivation to appear. They create it through discipline, through action, through clarity of purpose. Impatience is another emotion that is rarely understood. People assume impatience is about urgency, about wanting things to happen faster. But impatience is not about time. It is about control. It is the demand that life operate at one's own speed, the refusal to accept the natural rhythm of progress. A Stoic does not allow impatience to create unnecessary suffering. They trust the process, the timing, the unfolding of events as they are meant to happen. Most people believe that emotional intelligence is simply about handling emotions better, but true intelligence is about tracing emotions back to their source, questioning them, refining them, removing the false narratives that create unnecessary suffering. A Stoic does not blindly accept what they feel as truth. They interrogate emotions, breaking them down until only clarity remains. The ability to recognize what an emotion truly is, rather than what it appears to be, is one of the highest forms of self-mastery. It removes unnecessary suffering. It creates emotional independence. It allows a person to experience life fully without being controlled by passing feelings. Understanding the root of emotions brings clarity, but clarity alone is not enough. Life is not lived in isolation. Every person is surrounded by others, by relationships, by shared experiences. Emotional mastery is not just about controlling one's own reactions. It is about navigating the emotions of others without being consumed by them. This is where most people struggle. They either care too much, losing themselves in the pain and struggles of those around them, or they detach completely, shutting off empathy in an attempt to protect their peace. A Stoic does neither. They balance care with inner stability, offering compassion without attachment, empathy without self-destruction, and presence without emotional dependence. Many believe empathy and detachment are opposites, that one must either be deeply involved in the emotions of others or remain cold and distant. But this is a false choice. A Stoic does not withdraw from the world, nor do they allow themselves to be drowned by it. They practice informed compassion, a way of caring that is driven by understanding, not emotional overreaction. They help where they can, they offer kindness, they support those in need, but they do not take on suffering that is not theirs to carry. True empathy is not absorbing another person's emotions, but understanding them without being controlled by them. Many mistake emotional entanglement for care. They believe that to truly support someone, they must feel their pain, experience their sadness, carry their burdens as if they were their own. But this does not help. It only creates shared suffering. A Stoic does not drown with the person struggling. They remain on steady ground, offering a firm hand, guiding with logic rather than simply mirroring distress. They know that a person in chaos does not need another person drowning beside them. They need someone who remains clear-headed, someone who can see a way forward. Compassion is often confused with emotional indulgence. Some believe that to be compassionate means to soften, to agree, to validate every feeling. But real compassion is not about feeding weakness. It is about offering what's truly needed, not just what is wanted. A Stoic does not tell a person what they want to hear to comfort them in the moment. They tell them what will help them in the long run. This is why many struggle with true Stoic compassion. It's not about making people feel better temporarily, but about helping them become stronger permanently. Detachment is often misunderstood as indifference. Many believe that being detached means not caring, not feeling, not engaging. But this is not true detachment. This is avoidance. A Stoic does not avoid emotion. They remain unaffected by unnecessary suffering. They do not shut down empathy. They refine it. They do not disconnect from people. They develop the ability to be present without losing themselves. The key to this balance is understanding what is within control and what is not. Many people suffer not because they care, but because they try to fix what cannot be fixed, change what cannot be changed, or save those who do not wish to be saved. A Stoic recognizes the limits of their influence. They help where they can, but they do not carry burdens that are not theirs to bear. They offer guidance, but they do not force change. They care, but they do not attach their inner peace to outcomes they cannot control. One of the greatest challenges in balancing care with detachment is handling the emotions of those who are reactive, manipulative, or emotionally unstable. Many find themselves drained by the suffering of others, believing it is their duty to absorb pain, to be a constant source of support, to fix every problem. But this creates an unhealthy emotional dependency where the person offering help becomes exhausted, and the one receiving help never truly learns to stand on their own. A Stoic does not fall into this trap. They recognize when help is truly productive and when it is simply enabling weakness. They know when to offer support and when to step back, allowing others to develop their own strength. One of the most powerful forms of compassion is teaching resilience. Many believe comfort is the solution to suffering. They offer kind words, reassurance, soft encouragement. But comfort alone does not create strength. A Stoic does not simply console. They challenge. They guide others toward self-reliance, toward problem-solving, toward responsibility for their own emotions. They do not remove struggle. They teach others how to endure it. They do not create dependence. They show the way to independence. A major obstacle in balancing empathy with detachment is the guilt that often comes with saying no, with setting boundaries, with refusing to carry unnecessary emotional weight. Many feel that if they do not fully invest themselves in the struggles of others, they are being selfish. But this is a distortion of what true care looks like. A person who gives endlessly without protecting their own peace does not help. They weaken themselves until they are no longer able to offer real support. A Stoic knows that boundaries are not selfishness, but self-preservation. They understand that they cannot pour from an empty cup, that their own emotional stability must come first if they are to be of any value to others. True detachment is not cold withdrawal. It is the ability to stand beside another person without being pulled into their emotional storm. It is remaining steady while others are unstable, offering guidance rather than losing oneself in their struggles. It is understanding that one can be fully present, deeply caring, and highly engaged, while still maintaining complete internal peace. Another test of emotional strength is dealing with rejection, disappointment, and the emotional instability of others. Many become disheartened when their care is not appreciated, when their efforts to help are met with resistance, when relationships do not unfold as expected. A Stoic does not allow their peace to be dictated by the unpredictable nature of human relationships. They care because it aligns with their values, not because they seek validation in return. They offer kindness, but they do not demand reciprocation. They engage deeply, but they do not tie their sense of worth to how others respond. A major challenge in modern relationships is handling emotional manipulation, guilt tactics, and the expectation that one must always be available for others. Many people use emotions as tools of control, making others feel responsible for their happiness, for their problems, for their well-being. A Stoic does not accept this false responsibility. They understand that each person is accountable for their own emotions, their own struggles, their own peace. They do not take on guilt that does not belong to them, nor do they allow themselves to be emotionally blackmailed into actions that go against their own stability. One of the most powerful lessons in Stoic detachment is understanding that one can deeply love without attachment, that one can care without clinging, that one can support without sacrificing their own peace. Many assume that to love fully, one must risk losing themselves in the process. But this is not love. It is dependency disguised as devotion. A Stoic loves without possession, without control, without fear. They do not attach their happiness to any person because they know that true peace must come from within, not from the external world. Many believe that detachment means living without deep connections. But detachment is not about avoiding relationships. It is about freeing them from unnecessary suffering. It is about removing neediness, insecurity, fear of loss. It is about being with others fully while still being completely whole within oneself. A Stoic does not love less. They love more purely, without the weight of expectation or dependence. Balancing care with detachment requires emotional clarity, a deep understanding of what is within control, and the discipline to protect one's own inner world while still being present for others. A Stoic doesn't reject emotion. They refine it. They do not avoid connection. They strengthen it through resilience. They do not withdraw. They engage fully, but on their own terms, without losing themselves in the process. Mastering this balance is not just about personal peace. It is about functioning in a world that constantly pulls people in conflicting directions, that demands emotional involvement while offering little stability. It is about being a steady presence in an unstable world, a source of strength rather than a reflection of external chaos. Mastering your emotions like a Stoic is not about feeling less. It is about feeling fully without being ruled by those feelings. It is about breaking free from reactivity, no longer being a puppet to anger, fear, or insecurity. It is about living with clarity, choosing responses instead of mindlessly reacting, and learning that true power is found in self-control, not external dominance. You now understand that emotional intelligence is more than just awareness. It is the ability to process emotions at their root, separate stress from illusion, and handle the turbulence of life with unshakable inner peace. You've seen how language shapes emotions, how digital interactions challenge discipline, and how expectations distort reality. You've learned the difference between emotional suppression and discipline, the power of informed compassion, and the necessity of detachment in maintaining stability. But knowledge without application is nothing. Stoicism is not just a philosophy to be admired, it is a practice. It is something you must train, refine, and integrate into daily life. So here is your challenge. Choose one lesson from this guide and start applying it immediately. Will you start observing your emotions instead of reacting? Will you practice the art of the pause? Will you reshape your self-talk? Drop a comment below and share which Stoic principle resonated with you the most. Have you already been practicing any of these without realizing it? Or is there one lesson that hit you in a way you didn't expect? Let's talk about it, because the best way to deepen wisdom is to engage with it. If this video has brought you value, then don't just keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss future lessons on Stoicism, mental mastery, and building the kind of resilience that makes you untouchable. And if you made it all the way to the end of this guide, type Stoic Mastery in the comments, so I know who the real seekers of wisdom are. Your emotions are yours to command. Now, go put that power to work.